Thanks, Camila, for giving us this stage this afternoon. So we are going to start now with this workshop, which is called with this workshop. Sorry. So I'm going to share my screen. Thanks for coming this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are located, or even this night, to Tech for Posterity, which is the workshop I will be running this afternoon, in order to talk about the challenges for the future in topics like AI ethics and DEI. So the agenda for today is the following. So we are going to have several talks, starting with Tebogo, and we will have an open discussion after Marie's. And for sure, we will have two panels regarding how to overcome imposter syndrome, and another one about the future of work. So first of all, I will present myself. My name is Oyidiya, and I'm based in Barcelona in Spain. I'm a data scientist, and at the moment I'm working as a consultant in AI and civil society at Open Society. And my hobbies are traveling, reading, sports, and karaoke. I have many more, but I think these ones are the ones that I would highlight at the moment. So please feel free during this afternoon or this evening or this morning. If you have any ideas regarding these hobbies, I will be super glad to talk about it. And also, if you have any questions, just feel free to add me, and I will be glad to answer them. So I don't think I have anything else. So maybe we can start, Tebogo, if you are ready. Yeah, we are going to start with Tebogo's talk about AI ethics and DEI, because they are really a leadership responsibility. So Tebogo is a multicultural South African citizen and German resident. She's a consulting professional with more than 10 years experience in corporate, social, and enterprise and the state. She's currently occupying an executive position at Valvisio International, and she's a German strategy and management consulting firm in Nuremberg in Bavaria. Her expertise in and passion for topics around compliance, digital ethics, as well as the impact of increased digitization are on matters pertaining to diversity, inclusion, and representation. So I will hand over the floor to you, Tebogo. And yeah, feel free to share your screen. I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much for introducing and my topic. I'd get right into it. So I'd like to go just over the points that are going to be covered today, 6 of them. I'll try to give each one of them enough attention, especially for points to ponder and reflect on. Very briefly, thank you for the introduction, Oyi. And what perhaps is not mentioned so much is that I love to learn and continuous development and growth. And also, I'm an advocate of a healthy and sustained relationship between tech advancement for good, AI and digital ethics, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'd like to include today, as well as accountable corporate leadership, which is so imperative nowadays, and responsibility by everybody. So I don't need to talk much about the tech advancement and how astounding they've been, right? Literally in the last 5 years alone. From tree planting drones, predictive analytics, 3D printing, I'm sure you'll be able to inform me more about that myself. However, we've also seen a lot about the dark side of tech advancement, something that I'd refer to as the bad and the ugly. And I'm sure I hope you have watched the documentary Coded Bias, right? Where the problematic, especially the ethics issue pertaining to facial recognition technology was pointed out in different aspects. Then, of course, there were the headlines, right? And big corporate giants like Amazon, Facebook, IBM were in the news. So I'm an academic at heart, and I like to work with frameworks with definitions, and I'm going to start off with the definition of AI ethics. And the one that spoke to me most is the one that was presented by the European Parliament last year. Namely that AI ethics is concerned with the important question of how human developers, manufacturers, and operators should behave in order to minimize the ethical harms that can arise from AI in society, either arising from poor design, inappropriate application, or misuse. I'd like to point out that one part of this definition, and I've highlighted it there, is that human being is central. Its capacity as, I'm talking to the developers, to designers, I'm talking to corporate leadership, I'm talking to users, consumers, everybody along the entire value chain of AI products and services. Secondly, we need to consider the harm and the negative impact on society that requires to be minimized. All aspects of society, of course, social acceptability of products and services. I'm talking about the environment as well. I'm talking about where these technologies are sourced, where the raw material are sourced, and society there. Again, placing the human being in the center. And very important is also the responsibility on us humans along and across the entire life cycle of AI products and services. So I'm a jurist. So frameworks, guidelines, law, regulation, I'm here for it. And I'll let you in later on why it's so important to consider and to really invest the time and the effort to look at the international AI ethics frameworks and guidelines, because there are so many of them, which delights me. The first one is the European Commission's ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI. And this is one I like to refer to in some other talks as well, because it's aligned with the EU's GDPR, right? The General Data Protection Regulation, which is one of the strictest data protection regulation in the world currently. And these guidelines are very practical and even have case studies to ensure not only compliance, but also data, the digital and AI ethics. The OECD did the same thing, so did the Institute of Business Ethics, even Microsoft, giving out guidelines for responsible bots, OpenAI, and many others. So yes, I did say I'm a jurist, I like laws, regulations, but why follow frameworks and guidelines? Fact is that no technology and algorithm is socially or politically neutral. You probably ask yourself, how do I know this? Because I'm not a psychologist. I like this picture. I think that summarizes it very succinctly. In modern times, individuals are said to be influenced by 50 different cognitive biases that impact and affect different decision-making across the board. I'll just pick out 2 or 3 of the most prevalent ones. One is confirmation bias, focusing on information that only confirms the existing preconceptions. Sounds familiar, right? Especially when the corporate leaders say, we did loads of simulations. Most of them showed there's no problems. Another one that also spoke to me, and that's so very common nowadays, is the status quo bias, preferring the current state of affairs rather than change. I'm sure you've all heard the term, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So I'd now like to move on. I wrote in the beginning of our presentation, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Belonging is playing a much more important role in all these discussions, right? And in the concept around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And also here, I'd like to talk to corporate leadership, right? And when they deal with these aspects, to consider some of these primary concepts and these questions. Firstly, who is in the room, right? Make sure that there are different opinions, background, social groups, genders, sexual orientations, and there's a plethora and a prism of differentness that we could all get to produce better products and more acceptable products and services. Then, of course, equity asks who is trying to get in the room but can't because of existing barriers. And I took the liberty to include the smaller picture at the bottom, making the distinction between equality and equity, because often the very tall person in the equality picture on the left, or my left, does not understand these additional measures that companies, society, sometimes even governments introduce to assist the shortest person on the far right. It's not to make the person on the far right taller or give them advancement or unfair advantage, but as you will see, to level the playing field for everybody. Inclusion is also key. And here the question that's asked is, has everybody's ideas been heard, respected, and understood? As a minority in any fashion and every capacity, you know what I'm talking about. And as business leaders and team leaders, it's important to also consider that all the voices and opinions are indeed heard. Belonging, for me, is also very important. And that looks into whether people feel valued and comfortable enough to bring the authentic self to work. This can definitely be undermined for people who are part of the majority group, right? Where their authentic self is put as the norm. I was asked the other day if I really am an executive at a consult agency because of my nappy hair. This is how I bring my authentic self to work. What's very important in this whole consideration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is that it has to be an action. I've seen so many websites and companies that use these issues as marketing gimmicks, right, without the actual commitment. For example, Ingersoll Rand Diversity, on my left, literally put in sort of goals in certain years to reach certain goals by a certain year, and also which enabling initiatives to introduce. This makes me happy. Oh, I hope, and this shows that they do mean business in this aspect. And Baudoin Group actually has created key metrics to measure diversity. Here, I'm also comforted that they do put in the effort that's necessary. I'd like to summarize the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging considerations as follows. That diversity is a fact. Please don't go to your history books to try to prove it, because they don't have everything right, or they didn't put everything, the real truth of history, or the inclusive truth of history. Secondly, equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action, and belonging the outcome. Now, I'd like to address corporate leadership personally. Actually, any person in a position of leadership who's joined this part of the conference. And I like this quote by Stephen R. Covey, which I posted here, which says, accountability breeds responsibility. I mean, how important is it for a company to be very quick to respond in these very rapidly changing times, right? I'd like to start with the obvious. This very vast and rapid digital transformation requires adaptation of businesses and business models, of course, the reallocation of resources, as well as investment in workforce training and future demands. I'm sure there's nothing new here. Furthermore, I feel the following are imperative. First of all, acknowledging their own biases, that we all have biases and imperfections, actually being human, really, and that for us to challenge, to show this humanness to others as well. And also, it is also time for especially the bigger and older corporates to change the management ideas and ideals, and to make things like trust, autonomy, compassion, consultation, collaboration, the new order of the day. open mindset must be manifested. And here I say, ask rather than assume, because as soon as we all assume, please think of that picture I posted earlier on, the brain and all the 50 different types of biases that accompany us every day. The last point, it's quite a no-brainer, but I struggle a lot with it daily when I interact with certain peer executives, that people want to go back to how things were. That will never happen. Instead, we are all must embrace the discomfort of the new normal, which may never be. I'd like to give leadership some souvenirs for the road. I think I've mentioned a couple of times that human beings are in the center, and especially in terms of accountability, responsibility, consideration, and the plight of human beings along the value chain of everything that we do, and for us to also think longer term. Compliance and ethics should be established and should be part and should be prioritized from the onset. No entity wants to end up in a paper as a scandal, like Facebook, IBM, and others. Human biases should be minimized consciously. It is also great that so many courses and assistance has developed, especially in the last 1.5 to 2 years, where we can really inform ourselves to do things better and to be better so that we can get better. Also, and now I'm talking, I think, to the programmers and data analysts, that the collection and processing of personal data should be done very limitedly. There are also numerous guidelines on that. Ask Facebook. I mean, they were hit with a whooping fine of almost $900,000 not too long ago. Also, be vigilant on cybersecurity. Your business depends on it. Last but not least, I implore all of us to live and lead with responsibility and accountability. That's what we need more than ever, and is tested on a daily basis by all the decisions that we make. I'd like to end my contribution with a quote by one of my biggest heroes, the late Maya Angelou, who said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." I hope that through this contribution, we now know better, and that we will all do better. Thank you.
Thanks, Tebogo, for your amazing speech. It's been very inspirational. And I hope we have many questions arising from, I'm pretty sure about it, about your topic. So let's see if we have any questions for you. For example, there's Alfred who asks if doesn't having so many frameworks and guidelines confuse matters, or one can spend an eternity understanding and reconciling these frameworks, for example? What do you think about it?
That's a great question. And indeed, the nice thing about these frameworks is that they often cover similar foundations, things like transparency, things like diversity, and all these frameworks. So even though they do have different focal points, their basis and their foundations are all the same. And I've read also actually this morning another academic article in that regard, that there are certain points that are like a golden thread through them all. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, in the end, I think it seems like it's more about values, or the values that we have in ourselves, than what a company can think of, right?
Yeah, but true, right? I do still encourage everybody to have a look at frameworks, because what people often do with ethics is add a moral twist on it. And what makes me a bit nervous about that is that morality is also subjective. I don't need to go too far back in history and not too far away across the world, where it's still immoral. to have certain kind of hair, right? It's still immoral for certain people who look different to be in a relationship. So I tend to be a bit more cautious around morals, and I'd rather refer to more objective guidelines.
Yeah. So we have another question, this time from Tebogo, who says, what can we do to get rid of our own biases?
Oh, so much. Interact with people who are different from you. One of the benefits of always having been in a minority, even in South Africa, school I was a minority, is that you always seem to look out for other minorities, and you end up getting to know all of my friends look different from me, have a different background, right? So look for people who are different, have conversations, ask questions, reach out.
Yeah. And we have another from Jennifer saying that at a practical level, what are one or two ways that developers and data professionals can work these concepts into products and models other than limiting personal info collection?
I go back to frameworks and the law. I mean, already California already has a Data Protection Act, which is one of the strictest in the US, if not the strictest. So you will always be guided by that. There is always a guideline. And for startups and for founders, just check what the law says. And the nice thing about the internet is that there's always somebody who interprets and then has translated the law into practical steps. So literally, even before you design, you have your idea of the product you want to produce, please just go to those guidelines. Secondly, make sure in your team, nobody looks like you, nobody's from the same high school, nobody is similar to you. It's not always easy, it's worth it though, because it reflects the world as it is. We're so different.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we should learn from each other, and
yeah, definitely.
And from there we can always learn something else.
Absolutely, yes.
So thanks a lot, Tebogo. If you have any more questions for her, you can ask her directly in a message through the chat.
On LinkedIn. Please connect.
And also on LinkedIn, if you want to connect with her, that would be great. So yes. I think we should move now to the next session. Thanks, Tebogo.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marie Roker-Jone. Yeah, so Marie is the co-CEO of STEAM, which is a software as a service solution that helps employees take action on causes that they care about in the DEI space. STEAM helps companies move their sustainability initiatives forward by converting idealistic intentions into measurable actions. She's a social impact startup founder with over 10 years of experience in leading gender and racial diversity strategies. As the founder of Raising Great Men, she built a movement for parents, empowering them with resources to raise culturally aware and socially conscious children. She was the senior editor for the Good Men Project, a multimedia cross-platform site that asks, what does it mean to be a good man in the 21st century? Marie also has workforce and career development experience creating workforce re-entry programs for underrepresented communities through coalition building, employment readiness, networking opportunities, and community outreach. Marie was the lead for the Charter for Compassion's Compassionate New York City, and through her project, Compassion Convos facilitated cross-sectoral dialogue to examine implicit biases and their impact on our perception of criminality, economic disparities, educational underachievement, health disparities, and other factors that bring about social stratification and separation. So Marie, I welcome you, and please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So happy to be here. Thank you for taking time out to be here. I would first like to just make sure everybody's doing well. So I just want to if you can just post in the chat, I'm just going to put something, a little quick icebreaker. If you could just post that in the chat. Can everyone see it? Can you give me a thumbs up if you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so love to connect with others. So if you could just put in chat what you're good at, what is the goal that you are setting? The index finger is called a 5-finger icebreaker. What is frustrating you right now? What are you committed to? And a little known fact about you. So I'd love to read that as I am getting myself set up with my presentation. Yes, thank you. So today we're going to talk about creating trusted spaces for inclusion. And this can be difficult for companies because a lot of companies think about diversity and focus so much on the numbers and metrics and really who are we bringing in to build a diverse workforce, that not enough thought is put into creating places for inclusion and belonging. And what that does is that it, unfortunately, when you hire for diversity, it does, if you're not really thinking about being inclusive, the person that's hired can sometimes feel just mentally and emotionally drained from dealing with microaggressions, dealing with just subtle or sometimes even overt racism or sexism, whatever it may be. So we really want to talk about how do you create psychologically safe spaces for people. And what I'm going to do today is present it from both views. So for companies, how can you do it? And for yourself as an employee, how can you make sure that you're in a safe space for yourself? So one thing I like to talk about is the 4 ways to do that, because I think when you make it simple and it's something you remember, it stays with you, and it's not a lot of details. So number 1, I say, is be prepared. So as an employee, one of the things you have to think about is identifying what are your values and what's important to you, and how do you stick to that and maintain that in the workplace to keep yourself mentally and emotionally safe. So knowing what your values are helps you to, when something's coming at you, know that how is this going to impact what's important to me? And if it is impacting it in a way that is detrimental to your health or well-being or safety, then you have to make the decision, is this the right place for me? So it's always being prepared for that. The other thing I'd like to say is understand your worth. Know what you are worth. I think we spend so many time, especially in tech, you build a lot of times thinking about your technical experience, getting that job, proving yourself, but always know what your worth is. What is the value you're bringing to that company? Know that and be able to articulate it to yourself and to others. But if you don't know it, it's going to be hard for you to really define that when you are coming up against someone maybe questioning something you've done at work. If you know your worth, you're able to speak to any error that you've made, because we're human. You can make a mistake, but that doesn't take away your worth. And most importantly, when you're preparing for making sure you're in a psychologically safe space at work, identify people that can be trusted. And that could be difficult sometimes because our personal and professional lives, sometimes they overlap, right? And so people you work with may become your friends, but you have to really be mindful of who's a real ally, who will advocate for you. If you're in a meeting or you're presenting and someone says something to you, who's going to be the person that advocates for you? Doesn't mean that they speak for you or speak on your behalf, but it means they address anything that may be presented that negatively impacts you. And so for employers, on the other side, I say, be open-minded about a new approach, meaning be open-minded to thinking, how can I ensure that everyone, if you're on a team, everyone on my team is heard. Everyone on my team feels like they can contribute in a meaningful way. So be open-minded, be creative about how do we approach this idea of creating trusted and safe spaces. The other thing I say is engage all employees when it comes to talking about company culture. Your employees are your company culture. You don't have a company culture without your employees, without your team. They are who makes it. So let them be the ones that define what that culture is. As a company can still have a mission, can still have values, but your culture is not something that you can just dictate. It has to be something that employees are able to contribute to and tell you what that culture is. Also, encourage an environment where great ideas come from all levels of your organization. There are, you never know where a great idea is going to come from. So if you're not creating a space where, we talk a lot about having a seat at the table, which is kind of like an analogy of like being able to be there, be present, and have a voice. But you cannot just give your employees a seat at the table. You have to allow them to speak up too. So making sure that the environment where ideas are welcome and feedback is welcome. So that's one of the first things is the preparation. The second I say is be authentic. And this is really key for both sides because as people of color particularly, we tend to code switch, meaning that we don't bring our full selves, we bring the professional or corporate side we think that is more accepting and that other people are more comfortable with. And what that does is that lack of authenticity can really contribute to you feeling exhausted, mentally exhausted. I've been in workplaces where I've had to code switch. And at the end of the day, when I get home, I am mentally and physically exhausted because what I've done is put on a mask and not pretended, but I've shown a different side of myself as opposed to the real side, because I feel like some things may be misinterpreted, some things may be misconstrued. But if I had just been my authentic self and understood, going back to preparation, knowing my worth, I wouldn't be so quick to put that mask on. Know your triggers. This is really important. What triggers you? And if you know that, you have to protect yourself from being in situations that can be triggering. Can you always do it? No. But one of the things you can do is when you hear something or something is said to you or a colleague, stop and say, am I triggered by this and why? Really explore that. And if it means taking a moment to, like, if you're in a meeting and you need to turn off your camera for a moment, taking a pause, because in that pause is when you're going to really be able to, bring it down. There is a part of our brain called the amygdala, and that's really the center that controls our emotions. And what it does is sometimes our amygdala makes us just react, right? Or respond in a way. So really think about when you're triggered, what is a way that you can pull back for a moment, think about what is triggering you, and think about how you are going to respond to that trigger. But don't be so quick to respond to it, because in that moment, what you say is going to be what people focus on. They're not going to focus on what was said that triggered you. It's how you responded to it. And be honest with yourself. What are your needs? What do you need and want? Be honest with your supervisors, your team members. This is what I need and want to feel that this is inclusive. And there's nothing wrong in being honest with yourself and others. It's always in the delivery. It's not always what we say, it's how we say it. And being honest doesn't mean that you have to worry about how the other person receives it. You have to think about, how does it help you to feel more psychologically safe? And also find the balance between privacy and collaboration. And what I mean by that is, what is it that you want to share? And what is it that you want to collaborate with team members? as I said before, they can overlap our personal and professional lives. So really be mindful of what you feel, where you feel you can be transparent and vulnerable. For employers, I say build trust and credibility by being authentic. Don't just say it, don't just put up a black box, don't just tweet certain things because it looks good for your brand. Because internally, employees know that you're not being authentic. And what that does is now it makes them not trust you. So be authentic and you build trust by emphasizing the process. What's the process that we're going to be inclusive? What's the process that we're going to create in psychologically safe spaces for people that work for us? Be transparent. And as mentioned before, give your employees a voice. It doesn't mean that people have to be disrespectful or talk over. It just means that they have a voice. Once you have a voice, you feel safe enough to call out something or mention something. So make sure that people don't feel like they're being silenced, especially when things happen in the world that are traumatic and happen to particular groups of people. Be mindful of that and make sure that you're creating a space for people for that. Be accountable. Employees, what I want to say is take on anything you feel confident you can handle. And what that means is if someone says something happens, think about, do you feel confident enough to handle this? Or do you need an advocate? Do you need someone to be an ally for you? Know when to draw those boundaries too. What are the boundaries that you don't want people to cross or overstep? Don't let your ego get in the way. And what that means is don't let pride get in your way of accountability, especially if on your end you feel that something has been done and you don't know how to address it. So don't let your ego get in your way of really being able to express and be yourself. And know what you're able to handle, because it goes back to take on anything that you're confident to handle. Know what you're able to handle. If it's something that's really triggering, and again, you feel that you need some time, be honest about that. Tell your supervisor, I need some time off. I need what was said, and this is why. Put it in context for them. As an employer, own up to your mistakes. If you put out something in public or even in private internally, own up to, you know what, we made a mistake. We apologize to employees, and really think about how can you rectify that. Don't just own the mistake, but rectify it. Be responsive to employees' issues. If somebody's bringing up to you, someone just shared with me about how she's working with someone and daily she dealt with microaggressions as a Black woman. And her immediate supervisor, who was a white woman, saw that and told her, I'm sorry you're dealing with that, and believed her. It's really important. Don't make people feel like they're imagining what's happening. More than likely, microaggressions are so subtle, sometimes we miss it. So don't just think somebody's saying something because they're being overly sensitive, or don't make excuses that this isn't how this person meant it, because you don't know how they meant it. So just listen. Ask employees for feedback. Ask them, how are we doing? What can we do better? Do you feel safe here? And it could be anonymous surveys, but ask. And back up what you say with action. If you're going to do something, then do it. There are so many employers that committed to DEI. And I think the commitment was, I don't want to give wrong numbers, but it was in the billions. And what was actually done, the action, was in the millions. So a lot of companies did not even fulfill those commitments. So if you're going to do something, back it up with the action. Don't just use empty words. And I'm sorry with the numbering. Be proactive is my last one. Turn your frustrations into fuel. If you're frustrated about something, let it fuel you so that you can now feel like, again, do I feel like I can handle this? Turn that around so that you feel empowered, and document everything. Documentation is the key for you to feeling psychologically safer. Document what's happening, but the time, the date, the place, who, what, because that's the way you're going to be able to now speak about it confidently and also not let your ego get in the way. And choose your battles on what you'll think you'll gain or what you'll lose. And I know I have 5 minutes and I want to take time for questions. Choose your battles. If it's not worth it, then if it's not really worth it and it's not affecting you in a way that, again, it's triggering, or you feel that someone, even if it's not you, someone else has been insulted, think about where should you really address it? And take care of your own psychological needs. If that means if you have unlimited days, take those days. Don't just let them accumulate. They're there for a reason. Take those days and take care of yourself. For employers, communicate what you're doing to build this inclusively. Give your employees the opportunity to be themselves. You know, there's a lot of Black women in hair and, you know, wearing braids. So let employees be themselves in a way that, as long as it's not being disrespectful and it's not anything where you're appropriating another culture, let them be themselves. Encourage an open feedback culture. Again, as I said, like, let that be what your company culture is about. We appreciate feedback and actively listen to what is said and not being said. A lot of times, a lot of things can be learned in silence. And be inclusive of different ways of working, including home offices, because everyone, it has a different comfort level. So some people may have their camera off. Don't oblige or make people feel they have to have their camera on. If someone doesn't feel safe, then let them know it's okay. And you know, I'm happy to share this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we only have 3 minutes, but if anyone has any questions, please let me know. And always happy to connect with others on LinkedIn to help you build your network. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Marie, for this amazing presentation. I think it's super useful to have always tips for employees, but also for employers, which is sometimes it's when we have these kind of topics or issues discussing, we are always focusing on one side or the other one and never together. So it's a really good point to have them all together in one topic like this.
Yeah. You're welcome. And I know it's kind of a difficult topic sometimes. So if you want to DM me or ask a question, not in public, I'm open to that. So just feel free, and I will put my LinkedIn.
Yeah, just let me check if we have questions for you. I think we have.
I see a comment. I don't see any questions.
Yeah, I have one here. Just let me check. Yeah, for example, Jyoti is saying, how do we differentiate between our own perception of our abilities, mental abilities and soft skills, and the feedback perception that the team has about my capabilities?
It's a great question. I think that's where when you're documenting everything, that's when you can now talk about and ask questions. If someone says, we don't feel that Black women are always being told smile more or something like that. Or when someone says, calm down, to people who are not even excited. But ask questions. If something is said, ask can you elaborate, or can you give me an example? Ask those questions, because then that helps you to better know, is there something I need to work on, or is there a cultural difference in how I communicate and my employer or my supervisor? So feel free to say, can you please elaborate? Can you please give me more information? And then have your own little, like I said, documents to say, well, in that situation, here's how I handle this. Shows that you're prepared, and it shows that, again, you know your worth and you can speak to it.
Yeah, and also Jyoti was having an experience that kept her thinking about this bad experience for 2 days. How, in this case, can we keep cool if we are thinking and overthinking about this bad experience? Any tip?
Yeah, tips. If you need to speak to someone, if you have a mentor, or if you have a support network, get back to what I said about a trusted person. And if that person could be inside or outside, speak to that person and give them explain the background of everything so that you have an understanding of someone who's just objective, right? So that doesn't have any stake in anything and can honestly say to you, okay, I understand why you feel this way, and can help you to stay calm. As I mentioned about the amygdala, one of the things you can do that I do is like either breathe deeply, or using your hands. If you're in a meeting, if you press your hands together, it kind of helps you to stay calm. But if you need the 2 days, then take those 2 days. And if you need to see like a therapist or someone, a career coach, then do that. Do what you need that's going to help you, because everyone's going to have a different way of coping with it. So what are the coping mechanisms that you can put in place for when that happens for you? And who do you have that can help, support you in that time?
Yeah. We have another question regarding cultural appropriation. They say, thanks for this inspiring presentation. We are in a such globalized world. How can I know more clearly about what is cultural appropriation and what is not?
Great question. So cultural appropriation. So for example, if I were today to, I can admire and appreciate Japanese culture. But if it's interesting, I was in a Japanese like a fashion show it was, and I was dressed in a kimono, but that was part of the exhibit or whatever it is. But if I just came today and just wore a kimono and had, and just really was trying to speak in a way that really embraces Japanese culture, am I showing appreciation, or am I trying too hard to take on a culture that's not mine? So the difference is that the admiration or appreciation for another culture can be spoken or shown in a way that doesn't mean that I am trying to embody this, So there's something called blackfishing that a lot of people are talking about on Instagram, where you have white women that darken their skin so that they can look a little bit more ethnically ambiguous. That's something that would be considered cultural appropriation, because you're trying to look like, and you're trying to exhibit the characteristics of a different culture. If somebody is wearing Halloween that's celebrated here in the US, costumes, sometimes, someone's wearing a headdress, that's really, and if you think it's a costume, it's not, it's someone's culture. So think of it that way. If you're putting on something that's not really something that somebody can give you a gift, that's very different. But if you're wearing it and every day you're kind of trying to be like this culture without even really showing how you appreciate it through supporting the arts, supporting some of the things they do. So it's a fine line, but you feel it in your gut when it's wrong.
Yeah. So thanks, Marie, for giving us light into this topic. It's super interesting. Sure. I would like to continue the session with an open discussion. Actually, it is how to be an ally. So it would be like a kind of rehearsal, right, for what you have already been explaining to us. So yeah, I think we can unmute ourselves, and if you have any questions or you want to comment anything regarding this topic about how to be an ally, I welcome you, all of you, to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, we can appreciate others for some good job they have done.
Yeah, maybe what we can do is to once we see that there's somebody doing a great job, maybe it's a good idea to make them know that they are valuable in what they are doing in the company, and that for us it's a super interesting point that they bring out their ideas and they can speak up about them. So yeah, I think it's a really great point, Jyoti.
If I may add a point, I think going back also to sort of a mixture of, I loved Marie's presentation. Thank you so much. And she went deeply into a very important issue. And that's what relates to asking questions and having an open heart and mind and really being curious, because our preconceived ideas, being open to have our own biases tested, right? And even when we see something that is unknown or unfamiliar to us, just watch the thought process and rather ask questions. And one underestimates how quickly one can slip into it. Right. The other day as logo, a colleague ordered tuna pizza and she put lemon juice on her pizza. And then one other colleague mentioned, oh, that's something you must have picked up when you were in South America. Rather, you know, thinking, oh, okay, I've never seen this before. I would actually ask for a slice, you know, just to be curious all the time. Thank you.
Yeah, also I think it's very important to know how to ask those kind of questions and how to be polite in this when we are trying to learn about other people's culture. And yeah, and as you said, it's super important to be open-minded. We always have, because we all have our own biases. And the one thing that it's at least something that triggers me or that makes me think about it, it's when I feel uncomfortable when they said something to me that I supposed to, I don't know, that I was not expecting to have or to have that outcome. So when I feel when I'm feeling that something it's I don't know, I'm feeling uncomfortable with their question or their answer, it's something that I should revise myself why it is making me feel like that. Or even also sometimes why that person asked that or why that person had this opinion.
This is Maria. I wanted to just share something quickly about allyship because it's really about action. And just quickly, I'll tell you, when you see something, don't think about somebody being the need to save them. It's like, how can you speak up about an injustice that you've seen? Or how can you take action? And just quickly, I'll just give an example. As I was in an event with other founders and everyone there was white except me. And there were a lot of white males and I didn't have a seat at the table. So I sat outside. A white woman came in, sat beside me and said, why aren't you sitting? I said, there's no room. She said, no, I'm not gonna let that happen. So she said, on the count of 3, this man right here, we're gonna each take our seat and each of us sit on each other side of him. And we did. She could have come in, taken a chair and gone to the table, right? But she didn't. And that's what being an ally is. She saw that maybe I was uncomfortable, maybe I would be judged as a Black woman as being aggressive. And she didn't come to save me and say, oh, you poor thing. She just asked the question, why are you sitting? And I explained, and she said, no, that's not fair. So let's do this together. And that's what you have to think about. It's not saving someone, but seeing an injustice and taking action. And sometimes it could be something as simple as what I mentioned.
Yeah, I think your example, it's really eye-opening of what we can do and how our decisions are shaping in the end the way we think and how we can learn from others' experiences. So for me, I would like to ask Tebogo regarding because we always know the concept of DEI, and for me it was really eye-opening that you added belonging to it. I think it's a super interesting point that not many people say it, and I really value the summary that you gave about your DEIB, because sometimes it's easy to give a definition of these 4 concepts, but it's not easy to have examples of it, or examples that are out of company, right, in order that everybody can understand. So I really found it really interesting that you were able to give really easy concepts and easy examples in order to understand them.
Thank you so much. I think with any social science or any social concepts, it's always evolving, right? And I really hope that human beings, through introspection and reading and connecting with others, we grow and we expand. I think that's the only way forward. Not to be stuck, because even with Marie's cultural appropriation, I think it's a bit, it's a very uncomfortable, I personally find, issue, right? And of course the intent is very important, whether it's to ridicule or not. But what if I just want to celebrate another culture? And I do it literally just by wearing a headgear. And I actually don't believe that there is one person who only has one culture, because all families, culture, people traveled. I mean, sea travel, I did a talk the other week, sea travel started before Christ, international sea travel. So even before, way back, people across the world were connecting. So it's something I'm also learning and discovering, and wish we could celebrate one another more. Thank you.
Thanks, Tebogo. We have another question, which is how to have a conversation about tough topics or differences, and how we can approach this kind of ideas, or this kind of conversations. How can we make them less comfortable, I guess? More comfortable, sorry.
I mean, I'd be happy to talk about that. I think the idea is not to make it more comfortable. The idea is to sit in that discomfort for a moment. It's really something we're not used to it. It's unfamiliar to us. But if you sit in that discomfort for just a moment, you can start to ask, what is making me uncomfortable about this conversation? And I think that's what we don't explore enough, is that what is making me uncomfortable? When I hear a conversation, I have to ask myself that, what is triggering me about this? What is uncomfortable? And how do I explain it in a way that others can understand why I'm uncomfortable, And I think what's important to think about when we're having conversations that are difficult is ensuring that we are listening to understand and learn, and not just respond. A lot of times when we're having conversations around race or anything that's difficult, we listen, but our minds are thinking, what am I going to say in response to this? As opposed to what am I hearing or not hearing, what's not being said? And when I used to do those compassion convos, those are very difficult, because we had to create a space where you didn't judge someone based on their comments. You tried to understand where it was coming from, because we all, we have different backgrounds, we have different experiences. We don't know what led a person to be this way or think this way. Sometimes it could be anything, so we have to think about what is making this person, and that's hard. I'm not saying any of it is easy, which is why it takes time. And we're still learning. I'm still learning. We all still learning, because we have to understand that most of the times we're not having this, especially in the workplace, these uncomfortable conversations, these difficult conversations. And most importantly, creating those spaces of trust. Can I trust what is being said is not going to be taken out of this room? And create that. Make sure that you create agreements in the workplace. What are the agreements that we all agree that is it that we're going to respect each other, what is said? Is it that we're going to pay attention, put our phone down, make eye contact, whatever it is, have agreements that everyone provides input so that you can now be in a space that you feel is trusted and you can have these conversations and ask questions. I think, why do you think that? It's really important. Why do you think that way? Or why did you say that? I'd like to hear more. And when did you, or even at what age did you start thinking this? Because how we think as a child is not how we think as an adult. So what happened? And I did see another question, so I just wanted to bring your attention to it.
Thanks a lot for your answer. We have another question, which is, what can we do in a situation when seniors think that a junior woman would have less understanding of technicalities on the details of subject?
Anybody, I can answer that unless somebody else wants to. That's a hard one. This is like, I was reading, this is the first time where we have 4 or 5 generations in the workplace. So you have Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers. And in some cases, some people haven't retired, you have, I think, what's called the silent generation. So I would say set those boundaries and ensure that they're respected. And what you can do is, if it's one person, have a conversation with that person, especially if the dynamics are reversed, where this person reports to you. I think when somebody's senior and they report to someone junior, ensuring that they understand why you're hired for a position, more than likely it's because you can do the job. So really find out, talk to them about respect and how much you value their input, but that if they're saying something to you, particularly if it's in public or in meetings, that it undermines what you've worked so hard to prove. And that you want to have a good working relationship with them, and you want to better understand why they're questioning this. Sometimes it's really taking someone aside to talk to them one-on-one and getting that. A lot of times people do it because they're uncomfortable. Someone senior is uncomfortable with someone junior having to report to that person, or someone junior comes in and the person's afraid they might lose their job. So you don't know what the motive is, but I would speak to that person on the side. And if you feel that it's still not being addressed, then going a step above or finding that trusted person you can speak to. If you have a mentor, really getting them their input. But a lot of times it's around it's their problem. It's not yours. It's around how they feel about themselves. Maybe they feel, wow, this should be me. Why is this person here? And, what do they know that I don't know? And it's not about you. It's really about, they need to feel better about themselves. So the best way to make you feel better about yourself is to make someone else feel less about themselves and question their worth. So don't let them question your worth. Prove why you're there and let them know. Yeah, of course, we obsess. As women, we ruminate a lot. Like, why did the person say that? Why was this said this way? How come? And this is why it's great to have a mentor or an ally that you can brainstorm with and talk about it, because they'll help you see maybe, why do you feel this way? Or this is what you need to do. And they can give you and speak to, if you have women in your workplace or in different groups that you can actually network with or mentor with. Find out how they've handled it. I've met so many women founders, women who are older than I am, and women who have been through there, and they give me such great advice or insight. Find out how they handled it. And it was a different time, so maybe they handled it differently. So, but the problems don't change, it's how we handle it change. Like still gonna be the same where people have dealt with that. But know your worth, prove your worth, and set those boundaries and ensure that they're respected.
Yin Jung was saying, how would you know the workplace is not so biased? I sometimes think a place, even with white women, they are feeling superior about themselves than other races. I would just also extend this question to imagine you are looking for a job. Is there any way to know if that workplace doesn't have biases, or it's a good place to go and work for them?
Yes, thank you for that question. And if I may, the interview process is such an imperative process. And I think candidates should use this time also to interview the company, so to speak. Right. And it's I believe it a lot or much has to do with how you do and how you ask. Right. There's a way of checking. You can ask, how international is the team? Rather than ask, how many Black women are in the team, or how many queer people are, how international or how diverse is the team, on what grounds, why is this position available? Why is this, and really use the time to also interview the company. Because actually that's where one has the biggest bargaining power, because once you signed, you signed up as is for everything that's in there. On the point on superiors undermining the work, I've experienced this also extensively, both in South Africa and here. And how I fight my battles is often is not to say I can do it, but to show. So if, for example, somebody said something in a meeting and did not quite fit or was not quite true, I put it in an email, and then I put the sources of my information. Obviously, it's easier, especially being in the legal field, but I usually put that there, in terms of this or that document, this is how it is. And I just literally show you that I know what I'm talking about, and I came here through the front door. So that's a bit of a gangster way of doing it, but just to show that you're worth it, and exactly all the other things, allyship and getting to know people, but not being afraid to stand in your own light. Thank you.
She did such a great job. I love that, stand in your own light. I think that is a beautiful phrase to embrace and to think about. The only thing I would add is just Glassdoor is a really good, I think they even added diversity. So I'll put the link. So you could look and do informal interviews. If you can find, if there's a company you want to work for, find people on LinkedIn that work there and just ask them, can I connect with you? I just want to get your, I really love this company. And why, say why you do. Don't just say, this is a great company, but whatever it may be. But definitely ask people that work there already. See if you have one or two connection, one connection away from that person, and ask somebody to make an introduction for you. But I love the idea of asking those questions, how much diversity, how diverse is your board? This is one thing they'll know, is that you're paying attention and that you're not, you are on it. How diverse is your board? What are your retention numbers for diverse employees? What do you have ERG groups? How are you supporting them? Do you have a diversity and inclusion person? What kind of activities? You can even ask, do you celebrate different cultural observances? These are just, employers have to start realizing these questions are just, they're gonna be part of the interview process. And if they want you, they have to be able to show you why you should work there. It's not just a one way. Don't feel so desperate for anything. And I know, I've been there where I've been like, I want to work for this company so bad that I'm gonna, I'm not gonna overthink this, but you're worth it. Like, again, so definitely do the research.
And how can we talk about these topics if we are now, for example, in an online environment, which it makes it more difficult to, I don't know how to say it, but to be in the office and see if there are some things that are going on that maybe we should avoid. How can you, I don't know if these tips can be also relatable to the online or virtual environments that we are working nowadays.
Yeah, it could be difficult because of the hybrid. Some people are in office, some people are remote, and then people have offices in different locations, so international, US. It's really, if you're thinking about it for you as an employee, ensure that you're seen and heard, which means if you're in a meeting, ask a question. Or if somebody gives out a stat, ask more details about it. Show that you're there and you're present. If somebody says something, again, documenting is key. If somebody says something in a meeting that you feel was inappropriate, if you approach it in a way that document what was said, who said it, and if you can approach the person you report to about it. But again, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but we usually have to do more of the work, right? We have to be the one to document. We have to be the one to show and present why this is wrong. And it's exhausting. But if you're remote and everyone's in the office, ensure that you're part of the conversation. On Slack, make sure you get your Slack notifications, or reach out to people and let them know what you've completed. If there's something on your team and, hey, I've done this part already, let them know that you're ahead of the game. Also be a servant leader. And I have to say this with caution, because as women, we tend to over volunteer. I don't mean to volunteer for everything. We do that too much, and it depends on what it is. Take an initiative on something that's going to move your career forward. Don't just volunteer to look nice or to look like, hey, I'm available, because then that's going to be what people really are going to see you for, and you're going to be voluntold a lot of times. So just volunteer for things that move your career forward, but take the initiative on something so that you're seen and you're not forgotten. If somebody's undermining, again, you have to document what they've done, what they've said. And sometimes it means having a conversation with that person, but I wouldn't do it alone, only to protect yourself. I've been in those situations where, how do I put this? I've heard from many Black women and many women of color, I'm not going to say Black women, many women of color, about how white women use their tears as a way to really feel victimized when you haven't done anything. So just make sure you have a witness there or somebody else there, that when you're having a conversation, especially if you think this person can use your words against you. So yeah, it's hard, it's difficult, but you navigate it in the way that you feel most comfortable, and you'll find your rhythm. especially if you're remote, as you continue to work, and you'll find like, where can I insert myself so that I make sure no one's forgetting that I'm here and that I'm doing my work.
Yeah, another question we have is, how do I know if I am really only overthinking, or is the problem really present at the company? I think this is something that it's really common when we start overthinking about one thing, and that maybe we think that the problem is only about ourselves or just me. And maybe I'm overthinking about it and there's no issue in it. And or just the other way around, if it's the company, if there's a problem that the company has and they are already transferring it into us. What do you think about it?
That's gaslighting, and it's hard, but how you feel is how you feel. No one can tell you how you feel is wrong. And something my 10-year-old reminds me too, like, how I feel, you can't tell me how I feel is wrong. So what you're feeling, no one can tell you that you're wrong to feel that way. It's how you feel. What you can start to do is notice, when is this happening? How often is it happening? And sometimes people try to cover things up through a joke, right? So, oh, you're too sensitive. I didn't mean it in that way. But I think more employers are recognizing that they're going to be held accountable for what employees say or do. So, and it could be hard. I mean, this is why sometimes women take years to come forward about anything dealing with sexual harassment or even racism. Sometimes it takes one person to come forward and then a few others do. So more than likely, if you feel it, it's not your imagination. It's just that we have, in a way, been conditioned to think, maybe I'm overthinking this. Here's the thing, overthinking something usually is simple. And if it's a little complex, then you're probably not overthinking it. You know, I'll give an example. If somebody were to say, you're articulate to me, I'm not overthinking that. That's kind of a slight. It means, like, what would make someone say that? Would it mean that because I know why, because I'm Black, that, oh, she's articulate. But they're going to turn it around and say, but that was a compliment to you, right? So you have to be ready, and you have to be armed with the information about why that was inappropriate and why this is seen as something that is a microaggression. So you have to sometimes give the feedback and help and educate. And honestly, it's not our job, but it becomes our job because unless, we have to sometimes take ownership of things that are not our problem, unfortunately. And I think more corporations, more companies need to educate, particularly middle management. I think that's where a lot of the problem stems from. Educate on microaggressions, and not just do these anti-race, these one-off trainings, but have this continuous and even tied to people's promotion and their reviews. How are you creating an inclusive workforce? And sometimes it takes you even initiating something like that about, hey, how are we addressing this? Because it's happening. And sometimes somebody else may tell you, yeah, this has happened to me. But most often, not everybody wants to speak up for whatever reason, right? We can't judge them on that, but not everybody's going to speak up. And sometimes these conversations are happening in silos. But yeah, and if you have an ERG group, that usually helps, because then that's a space for you to be like, oh my God, this is happening. Yeah, it's happening. So it's not your imagination. It's just, it's happened so much. It's kind of a gaslighting thing. Like, is this happening or it's not? Yeah, it's more than likely happening.
Tebogo, do you have any opinion about this that maybe you would like to share?
Oh, this is a difficult one, in the sense that I agree with what Marie was saying. However, I found myself in a situation where I'm just trying to think of the context, at the exact context, but it's something that I assumed to be discriminatory because I've experienced discrimination so much. So I almost expected and assumed it. And then I had to break myself and said, no, but there's nothing this person did or even showed, and I had to check my own scars and my own experience that assume some conversation or some instances as discriminatory. That's the first thing I was thinking about. Secondly, it's also important to when one has a bit of a relationship with a certain colleague, and I was not sure if one has read too much into it. And that's actually something that happened to me. And I literally went to this person and I said, I'm not too sure if I literally said, I'm not too sure if I've read too much into it, but there was an element of trust between the two of us already. We've done lunch, etc. And I was just very open, and we spoke openly about it, right? And it turned out that person was wrong and actually did not read too much about it. And then we immediately worked through the solution, i.e., how to ask this kind of question the next time, or how to approach the issue the next time. And I always then said to her and to other colleagues, just ask if you have any questions, doubts, any news report, whatever you read, about South Africa, about the continent, just ask me. And also just to be open to answer questions and not have an air of, oh, they're trying to discriminate me, that's why they're asking the question. But actually be open to receive the question, right? And answer them with an open heart. So as I said, I think it's on all of us just to do the work. Thank you.
Thanks for giving your opinion, Tebogo. It's really interesting to always have this question and to have an answer, even if you don't have the answer from the person you're asking. I think it's a good tool also to find yourself the information, because sometimes it's something more personal than, because of course it's curiosity, but also it's something personal. It's about your personal development. So if the person you are asking is not eager to give you an answer, I think it's also a good idea to try to find other people who can answer it, or find other kind of sources. I mean, books, on the newspapers, or try to find the answer to your questions always, I guess. So in order to talk about this panel about imposter syndrome, I had several questions, and if you want, we can follow them. If not, we can go with the flow. So my first question about imposter syndrome for you, Tebogo, and for you, Marie, would be, what do you think are the signs of imposter syndrome? Do they vary depending on the person, or are there like specific traits that you can see in general?
It's an easy one. I'm just thinking, because it's, how do you explain it as a person feeling it? How to explain it to a person. I think that's where the big challenge lies. And even that is influenced by a lot of past experiences, right? And it speaks to different things, because obviously, so I see that there are fellow South Africans here, and I'm so grateful. And one thing that's very specific also to South Africa is, of course, because of apartheid, and Black people are literally at the bottom of the value chain, and then there's a bit of a complex, and we're taught to fear white people, right? Because they've always been portrayed as rich, as wealthy, as beautiful, as successful. And you get into a workplace and we underestimate and undermine how much these things play a role, that we actually do not speak out, and then we blame, the white man, etc. But actually it's us, because we don't feel confident and we actually feel a bit afraid. So for me, especially when I moved to Germany, that was a big thing, because it was a new market, a new continent for me, right? And often I would doubt myself and my abilities, and just to get used to this area here and the ways of working. On the other hand, and speaking to a point that Marie raised earlier, companies have to do the work, right? Because if they create an environment that will continuously, over weeks and months, make it uncomfortable for me to speak up, because I'm not included, which means I'm not given a chance to speak up, I'm not given a voice, then my feeling of imposter is a response to the work environment, right? Yeah, that's my contribution for now on it.
I love that. I think it was, what you said just really embodies everything, that I was thinking of. I would say the only thing is, again, imposter syndrome makes you doubt your skills, your experience, yourself. And unfortunately, it makes us question our value and how valuable we are, what we have to offer. And it's so taxing on the mind when we have to deal with imposter syndrome. And it could be simple as someone questioning our education, questioning our skills. I think we get that a lot as people of color, the questioning of where did we go to school? And there's a difference between being inquisitive to learn more about someone and just doing it because you doubt they're here on their own merit. So it's constantly having to prove why you're worthy of being in a place. And one thing I'll say is, if you are in the same space as those, you earn the right to be there.
Yeah, what I do, I sometimes when I get a sense that certain things are being questioned, or I even get some crazy questions and assumptions, being from the continent. I just use it as an opportunity to educate. I was speaking about COVID, and I was asked if we have ICUs, hospitals with ICUs in South Africa. And then when I watched the news, that was the time when the different COVID variants were discovered, right? And there was a South African variant, so-called. And I was so shocked when I watched the news, German news, they showed footage of it. It was a desert and UN refugee tents. And I was like, this is not South Africa. We have very arid areas, but we don't have any desert with agent. And also the people who were portrayed, we have certain features in South and Southern Africa, and there were more of East African facial features. See, so it was not even portrayed correctly, So I'm grateful I didn't approach that question with aggression, but with understanding that no wonder this is what you think of us, and have the question whether we have ICU units in our hospitals. It's literally what you get fed, and the impression created about how we live. So especially when I get questions, I actually, I try to be positive about it and literally be open to give an answer, and literally as an opportunity to educate.
The only thing I want to say is, I always say to people, you're not an imposter, you're an outlier. And being an outlier, really, it boils down to just being someone, who you have unconventional approaches, you have a different approach to things, and you stand out for your accomplishments. So look at it that way. Look at yourself as not an imposter, but an outlier. Maybe you've gotten into tech, not through college, but you worked hard and did self-study. You're an outlier. You are positioned, you have done what you need to really make yourself stand out, and you don't follow the pack. Mm-hmm. So that's what how I like to approach it. It's hard, but yeah, if you can just reframe the narrative for yourself, because reframing it for culture, for society, is going to take a long time. So reframe it for yourself and ask yourself, why did I think I was an imposter? I'm an outlier.
Yeah. I think that Tim wanted to contribute. I don't know if you can unmute yourself and give us your opinion about it.
Thank you. I think when you talk about imposter syndrome, the way I look at it from my perspective, I think you asked how you can be aware that it's there. It's certainly some sort of fear, and I think the biggest focus of fear is to stop you from moving forward. And that's the biggest force of fear. I have a small definition of myself that I keep on reminding myself that fear is not the absence of courage, but courage is not the absence of fear, but it's feeling fear while moving forward. So definitely when you see, when you feel that you're not moving forward because of probably that, then you should acknowledge that it's something that you should probably work on. But you should be probably move forward. If it's stopping you from, for example, advancing from applying for that job, right? You should be able to move forward while feeling fear. I mean, just look at what happened. Fear. Sometimes I don't know. I think sometimes I feel like we are too. As a human being, we are too. Sometimes it's good to just take risks. I mean, no one knew anything like COVID would happen. So, thanks. That's my opinion.
Thanks for sharing your insights, Tim. Maybe we can move to the next question I had, which is, how can we support others that are suffering from imposter syndrome? How can we give them tips, or how can we, by our actions, make them move forward?
I would say remind them of the times where they have, done something extraordinary, shattered records, or it doesn't have to be extraordinary. Remind them of the times where they have faced adversity and been successful. Remind them of who they are. And sometimes it has to be reminding them of what they've done, because sometimes just saying, no, you're great because you do this doesn't always work. So just say, remember that time when you took on, you know, whatever, and you were able to empower others. So give them a moment in time where they have, maybe they've forgotten that they've done that, and remind them that everything takes time. And if they're feeling this way, why? What is it that, you know, Tim brought up fear. Some of the times we feel the imposter syndrome is when we're successful. It seems that that's when we start to question everything. When we start thinking, oh my gosh, should I really be here? Even though you're doing it. And even when we're not doing it, or we feel that we are failing, and I don't like to say fail, but if you do feel that way, one of the things is give that person, remind them to allow a space for grace for themselves. It's okay. We're human, and you're not going to always get it right. And so remind them to not be so hard on themselves, but also remind them of the times that they've done things so that they can keep that in mind, which is why I'll go back to documenting things. When you write down the things that you've done, you can go back to it and say, wait a minute, no, I did this. And I can prove, you know, so write those down, journal it, whatever you have to do, just document what you've done, especially if you're working remote or someone else is working remote and you want to support them. Make sure that they are writing down the stuff that they're doing, how they're contributing to the team, what value they're adding. Again, dates, time, all that matters, so that you can go back to it. And when you're speaking about your accomplishments, and then tie it into how you're helping the company be successful. So remind them to tie it back to the company's success, how they've contributed to that.
Yeah, for example, in my case, as you said, I journal them, my achievements every month. I just write down one achievement that I feel like it's a super thing for me. And when I feel down and I don't know, and I feel more insecure, I don't know why, what I do is check them again, read them, and say, hey, you've done many things in the last, for example, now in the last 10 months. So you can see that you're already good, you have been already been doing lots of things that they've been really been valuable for you and for the company. And I think it's a way of moving forward, just to seeing with a kind of perspective, how have you been growing in the last months, in the last years? I think it's a very good exercise. And I really recommend it to everyone.
Yeah, if I may chip in there, thank you so much for both of it. And that is very true. I've actually started doing it, and it does feel good. There's a lecturer of mine, this is a couple of years ago, who recommended, it was an assignment, it was called Best of Me. And the assignment was to prepare 3 questions. So who they are, how they relate to me, and to put out a situation where they saw the best of me, and to send that to at least 10 people in different parts, not only former colleagues, but also friends, family, exes, whoever I had a relationship with. And I was astounded that even things I didn't remember I did or said had such an impact on other people, right? And then obviously by reading them all, so there's a golden thread that I realized about my own personality and strength. And it's also part of recording. So it was emailed, so it's typed. So it is in a very secure folder, because often we are our own worst critics. And we often, and my other classmates attested to this, that it's quite mind-blowing what an impact we actually have, a positive one, on people around us, and we tend to undermine it because we're always consumed, by the negative about us. So I encourage you to do it. It's called Best of Me. And literally just ask the question when, just put it the situation when, and which situation you thought you experienced the best of me. You'll be surprised and over the moon by the response. Thank you.
We have another question about this, which is, how can we make sure that people understand that they are enough? That they don't need to overperform all the time in comparison to the majority of groups. I guess in this case, the question is, when you are part of a minority, how to say, hey, it's enough, I'm doing the best I can. How can we make others know that we are not going to overperform in this case?
That is so, okay, I'm gonna take a moment to think that one.
Yeah, I would say how to say enough is enough. But yeah, it's a really difficult question, and because maybe it's how you have to approach the people, like, because probably the message is clear, but how to deliver it is the difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I understand correctly, how to encourage people feeling the imposter syndrome, or how to talk to the person who might be responsible for your feeling the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, how to make the other person know that you are enough. Like, I'm not an imposter, I'm not, or maybe I'm dealing with imposter syndrome, but I'm doing the best, I'm doing my best. And this is what I'm going to deliver to you. This is all my energy I have for you. I'm not going to give you more of what you are asking, because sometimes I guess that when you are part of a minority, they are asking something, or you need to prove more than others. So how can we make sure that the rest understand that we are like the rest of the group, for example, and that we are not going to overperform?
It's not an easy one, and we have to be careful to always, when we say compared to the other ones, are we comparing apples with apples? Am I actually more senior than the one I'm comparing myself to? So I tend to not like to compare myself with a colleague in which I don't have the same list of responsibilities and have the same position, because different things apply, right? But I prefer to treat each scenario of injustice, feeling of injustice, or feeling of unfairness as it is, right? So I don't like to compare myself to others, because especially if they're not, we don't have line on line the same responsibilities. So if I'm overwhelmed or it's too much, I mean, I do this to date when I have this long list of things and I must do it in a few days. I actually go to my group CEO. I said, okay, help me prioritize. You tell me what's priority and by when. I don't even take up, because he's responsible for that part of the business, and that's also how I avoid overwhelming myself. I literally just put it back, said, okay, you have to do this 15. Tell me what you are, and then they will also see that the list is quite unreasonable. And then, I'm fortunate they'll say, okay, actually, this is very important. Or when I still feel that the reduced list is a lot, I say, but you're undermining this. Drafting this does not take half an hour. actually in my line of work, and if you want good quality work, it will take me 2 hours, if provided I'm uninterrupted. So may I give you X and Y today and, or tomorrow? So it's about managing the expectation with respect, of course. And of course, there are times, before audits or before year end or before month end where things have to be pushed through. And of course, you will have longer hours, but I think we should always remember that even when we deal with seniors or people who are different from us, we are dealing with human beings in the end. And we just talk and ask. But I would definitely give it back when I feel overwhelmed. Thank you.
The only thing I would add is, as I said, set those boundaries, make sure that you enforce them too. Sometimes we tend to contribute to that by doing more, thinking that I'm going to prove myself, and then you just end up mentally and emotionally exhausted because you're pushing yourself too much. So we have to also step back to say, how am I contributing to this because I feel like I have to prove myself? So maybe I am going above and beyond. And then now that's how whoever you report to or your team members are going to, that's what they're going to measure you by what your contribution. So if you've pushed yourself to the limit to get something done, then that's the expectation they're going to have. And so then if you just try to change that midway, then people are now they're going to question you. So you have to really step back to say, what's the most I can give where I feel confident that I have contributed in a positive way without overextending myself? Because it's that overextending yourself part that we forget how we do it. That's in anything, any relationship. Sometimes you go above and beyond because you want to prove something. But then that person, when you stop doing it, the person wonders, well, what happened? And so then it flips on you then. But all you are trying to do is show them. So you have to say to yourself, how can I prove myself in a way that, again, protects me and I feel safe in doing it without feeling I have to, and ask yourself, what is it that you have to prove? Because sometimes we're getting that message, but sometimes it's also what we tell ourselves. And it could stem also from what we were told as kids, right? And the messages we get there, it's like, you have to work harder. Like we tell kids, you have to work harder than everyone else to get then that's going to be the message that stays in your mind. And you think, I have to work hard. There's no way around this. But if you say that you've earned the right to be in the same space as everyone, do your best. So when someone questions your ability, ask them, so why, what makes you say that? Or give me an example. Sometimes when you ask people for example, that's when they get stuck and they don't have anything to say. Always ask, can you give me an example? And if they can give you an example, and you can continue asking questions about how did you feel that I didn't contribute? And again, the tone is important so that no one can say you're being aggressive. No one can say you're being defensive. You say, I want to know because I want to always make sure that I am doing my best, but also balancing my work life. Right now, there's a lot of conversations about that. So employers know that work-life balance, people are going to just jump ship if they're not getting that. So you have to say, I want to balance my work life, so please let me know. And also pay attention to deadlines, because I think that's where we overextend ourselves, because everyone has a deadline. And if 5 people have a deadline and they're expecting you to do it, you're going to have to say, if you have to email everybody, say, hey, you've all had the same deadline. Please decide which is a priority. Don't let them make you decide what's a priority, because then somebody else is going to be upset. But let them know, open those lines of communication and push back a little I think we've been conditioned to think that we can't. You can. And there's a way to do it without feeling, worrying about how somebody else is going to receive it. Push back a little. Deadlines are what creates these problems of imposter syndrome. We have deadlines that sometimes don't even mean anything. It's just somebody creates a deadline because they feel like I need to have it by this time, but do they really need it? So again, if someone's giving you a deadline or they've given you an assignment and they haven't given you a deadline, say, when do you need this by? What are you looking for? Ask questions. And if they can't answer it, then you say, in order for me to do this in the way that you would like me to do this, I need more information. Have them step back. I mean, we can't keep taking on everything. So give them the ownership of that.
Thanks a lot, Marie and Tebogo, for your contributions. They've been super valuable, and I guess all our attendants have learned from your perspectives and regarding this topic, how to overcome imposter syndrome and how to be an ally, and also from your sessions. Thanks a lot to both of you. We will now go to a break, a 10-minute break. Yeah, so we are back in 10 minutes. So at 18:10, we have another grateful session from EE. So I'm waiting for, we are looking forward to it, but yeah, we must have a break, a 10-minute break. See you in 10 minutes. I'm going to present our next speaker. Now it's the time we are back from the break. So now we have with us EiEi. She's an enthusiastic tech recruiter who's people-orientated. She's originally from Myanmar. Her family immigrated to Malaysia and studied there till her bachelor and got her first job. Her background is in business administration, majored in human resources. She started working as a common event analyst intern, but she didn't like it, so she started as a recruitment coordinator, which really loved it, and went into recruiting in an agency for tech recruitment after migrating to the Netherlands. While grinding after a year and few months, had an opportunity to be an in-house recruitment business partner. So she took it and filled the tech and data teams at a company called 5CA. Once the team settled, another opportunity to be embedded recruiter approached her, and she was in for the challenge at We Are Keen as a tech talent partner. She works for her client in Berlin, which is Get Your Guide, and which has a #1 travel experiences booking platform. So EiEi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Oyidiya. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here with you guys. I speak a little bit fast, so please let me know if I need to slow down. Thanks for the introduction as well. I really appreciate it. And I would like to talk today about DEI hiring. I would like to share my screen if that's okay. So I've prepared some slides and I just want to share some insights with you guys to talk a little bit more about hiring in diversity, basically. So I've been a tech recruiter for about a few years now, and today I would just like to talk a little bit more about the challenges we face in hiring DEI, and also as a challenge individually as a DEI person, how to thrive in an environment that is competitive, but at the same time to be different than others as well. So I'd like to touch on a little bit of both topics, but first and foremost, thank you so much for the introduction, Oyidiya, once again. I'm EiEi, I'm very much people orientated, so please feel free to ask me any kind of questions you have. I'll be more than happy to answer that. But first and foremost, I'm a recruiter. So I'm recruiting at Get Your Guide, and I'm recruiting at We Are Keen as well. So for those who are interested in recruitment, We Are Keen is hiring for every level of recruiter, and Get Your Guide is hiring for all kinds of technical positions. So I'm willing to, take on every kind of introductions over here. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So Get Your Guide is a traveling platform, and we want to be the best travel experience provider in the world. So that's our ambition. Now, moving further to diversity and inclusion in hiring, it's a big challenge and it is a big topic, especially right now that people are working in tech and people are working with AI solutions and automations, because how they work with AI solutions and automation, they have to create patterns and algorithms and like those kind of machine learning models, and those kind of models mimics what has happened in the past, and that's exactly how they are working on it to hire for the future, right? So if they don't have a diverse team who is creating those programs, then those programs are going to be biased themselves, because those people are only looking at one perspective. They are not expanding their horizons. So that's the case that actually happened with Amazon in the past. They created this algorithm, which was started up in 2014. And from the past, they actually predicted which people would be successful. And in 2015, they actually realized that the program was predicting only white male people to go for the positions, because that has been predicted successful in the past. So they were actually excluding every female candidate, who were actually qualified for the job or beyond qualified at that point. So that is the critical challenge that we're facing in hiring as an organization, even in Amazon. So you can imagine all those smaller companies will struggle as well with these kind of algorithms. So that's why diversity is now critical more than ever. In the age of AI, in the age of automation. And another case in hospitals in US, they actually realized that the patients who were sicker than the normal average white patient were not being attended to because they were coming from a Black background, for example. So that was an actual real case. And if you click on the link, you can actually see that in an article, that those cases were very real. And the people have severe consequences, of course, because they were not attended, because the hospitals were full. And it's just like the COVID situation, that the people who are diverse are not being cared for, but the people who are privileged or the general white, that common part where it's a norm, for example, those people are taken care of. Like for me, for example, when I moved to the Netherlands, I didn't get an opportunity right away. I was actually discriminated because I didn't have the Dutch name. I didn't have a common white name that's on another side, and I didn't speak the language. So that was also a discrimination I faced when I was trying to get a job, getting my foot in the door. And I also actually got a lot of recruiters who were not able to understand me while I was telling my story. And they didn't bother to clarify. And that's the main problem with recruiting today. There's a lot of recruiters who are out there who actually hold the position and they are closing the door on you. So as a diversity candidate, what can you do then? That's what I'm going to talk about today. So any questions so far? Okay, I take that as a no. Moving on. So how do you actually get hired as a diverse candidate then in this case? First, you have to have the basic skills. Of course, a lot of recruiters look at your CV. A lot of recruiters look at your skills. A lot of recruiters always look at what experience do you have. Hands-on experience is very critical. So what you really need is to get out there and do the dirty job. If it's an open project, for example, if it's an open source code, learn to code. If you are into programming, if you're into full stack, or if it's about a project, then do those voluntary projects, for example, where you can actually learn project management, where you can actually learn stakeholder management. So those kind of skills will help you get your foot through the door. And once you actually get a job, then you can build it up from it and it will get easier. And you have to always upskill and invest in yourself. I know it's a little bit monotonous, but we are in this 2021. We always have to upskill ourselves. What I do to myself, basically, I always have an evaluation every 6 months. What did I learn in this 6 months? What do I want to improve? And then another evaluation by another 6 months. Where do I want to go next? So you have to basically invest in yourself. What do you want to learn? So about 6 months ago, I didn't know what was RPO recruiting, for example, but now I'm working in an agency, which is an embedded recruited model, which is basically RPO. So I help my own clients. So that's another thing you can do that. And I also went to this conference in a few days ago in this week itself. And it was really a very interesting conference where you can learn hands-on skills about how to be a better recruiter, getting out of LinkedIn, for example. So those kind of skills apply to me in my career. So you can apply those skills in your career as well. And you have to define and make it clear what you bring to the table and also know where you stand throughout the process. Now, this is a little bit tricky because there's a lot of recruiters who will not tell you where you stand through the process, but you have to be a little bit more proactive. You have to ask them, how do you see me as a candidate amongst others, for example? So then you will get an idea where you stand in that particular company, in that application, whether you have competition against a senior candidate or whether you have a competition against their own internal candidate. Sometimes it happens that they're looking for a role externally and then it gets filled by an internal candidate. So if they are in the process, they will tell you. Or if they are good enough, then they should tell you. If they are not telling you, then that's not a company you want to work with, that I can assure you. Not only apply to the jobs as well, but at the same time, actively network with the recruiter, actively network with the hiring team, for example. If you're joining a data team, find out who's the manager of data analytics, for example, if you're joining analysis team, or if you're joining a data science team, for example, find out who the director is, proactively approach them on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very good tool that you can actually network, or for example, find them on Stack Overflow or GitHub, for example, you can find those profiles. So you can do that, a bit of networking. And interpersonal skills are very important when it comes to looking for a job. So not just the hard skills that we look at. When they reject you saying you are not a culture fit, we've all heard that. We've all had that down the line, right? And that's exactly what they mean, that your interpersonal skills have to be improved a little bit. So maybe in the stakeholder management, you can ask the recruiter to maybe clarify for yourself, where do you see my improvement? Where can I actually improve? Can you give me a little bit of feedback? Where did you think I lack for this position? What can I do to improve it further? If you ask those kind of questions, the recruiter can also see that if you already have a clear path for the future, they will, even if you are not a great fit at that time, they will keep in touch with you for future positions, because that's what we do as good recruiters. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of shitty recruiters out there, and I'm not saying all of them will do that, but there are good recruiters who will look out for you. So that's what you can do. You can also keep your networking skills with the recruiter themselves. And you need to really speak clearly if you want to get a position, and especially if you come from a different kind of culture. I'm a very much of a diversity advocate myself, because I come from a very high context culture. That means that we don't speak directly. That means that we talk about 20 sentences before we get to the actual point that, yeah, you need improvement, EE. We don't talk about that in the first sentence. But then I ended up in this Netherlands, where feedback is a very important thing, and open communication, on the other hand, is another. I need to grasp what is their way of communication, and what is the best way for me to stand out as a candidate is the clear communication and open communication. So throughout the process, I always ask my recruiters or whoever, the hiring managers, for example, do you have any feedback for me? Do you have any insights that where I can improve on? Because I honestly want to improve myself. That's one. And then second, it's always good to improve yourself down the line genuinely as well. And it also gives you, third, it also gives you the perspective of what they are looking upon, what they are looking at you. So if I see EE, I see full of myself. But if they see me from one perspective, like, okay, she has too much of energy that our company cannot take if the company is too small, for example, then I would see that, okay, maybe I need to tone it down. Maybe I need to blend in better, or maybe this is not the company that where I want to work with. That's also important. Is that also a match for me as much as a match for them? Last thing is very much personal, but I'm always the friendly recruiter, and I always admire to be one. So I'm always keeping it on the ground. You know, I'm always keeping it friendly with every of my candidate, every of my hiring manager. I'm keeping it simple, keeping it humble. If you keep it simple, everybody will like you, because nobody likes a complex process, right? We all have our lives, we all have our things rolling. So we want to make sure everything that we're requesting them to do. If hiring managers, for example, if I'm asking them for feedback, I have to simplify the process so that they will actually be able to pick it up there. It is easy and relevant for them to pick it up as well. And find your passion. I like HR, but I honestly didn't like Common Ben as Oyidiya introduced me. I hated the numbers in Common Ben, and I really was tearing my hair apart. So you need to find if data is really for you, or if you want to do something else. So if you say, you know, you're really not in the numbers, if you're not able to do those, the Python language, for example, or the machine learning programs, you want to explore something else, you can also do the business analyst part, where it's more like stakeholder management, documentation, planning, and project management, for example. So there are other fields that you can explore, not just stick to the technical part. Find what you love and share it with the others so that they also see that you have that passion. You want to share it with your team, for example. So that's what my advice is as an individual, if you are a diversity candidate going for a position. Moving further, as diversity can be a challenge to the organization as well. As I've mentioned earlier, those cases from Amazon, those cases of, you know, hospitals where they rely on algorithm, and because algorithms are not perfect, because the people who are doing it are only looking at one perspective and not the whole of the problem. So now we're going to talk about the challenges as an organization faces when, you know, they are trying to hire a diversity and inclusion candidates. Now, I'm just going to share my 2 cents with you with what I have seen, for example, after they even hire a diversity candidate. What they struggle to do is when they hire a diversity candidate, they just hire the candidate. The candidate is onboarded. They are given tasks. About 6 months down the line, if the employee, now, of course, the candidate, the employee, that diversity employee wants to say something in the board or in the project, for example, they are sometimes sidelined. But that is not the ideal diversity hiring that you should do. You should always have a member, or you should always have somebody to listen to them, because they bring different perspective. And that's exactly the point why you hire them in the first place. A lot of my female candidates share with me that in the tech world, it's not easy for them to survive because it's very much male dominated. And every time they speak up, there's always one guy going, no, we're going to do that the other way, not your way, because you're a minority. And that happens. And when that happens, that talent will leave the company. And when that talent leaves the company, what happens? You only have the same 20% perspective on the whole problem. The other 80%, you're not covering it. So if you do an app release, for example, that only that 20% will look at, when you release it to the market, it's not going to be successful because it's only attractive to the 20% and not the rest of 80%. They're just like, no, this app is shit. It's not including them. So it is critical for them to include. At the end of the day, you are targeting everyone. Am I having any questions in the chat?
Yes, but if you want, you can finish and then we can go with the questions.
Okay, then we do the questions at the end. All right, cool. So moving on, how to tackle those challenges as an organization. You need to broaden your hiring sources. You cannot just hire based on that Amazon pattern, for example. You cannot just hire only white male based on their patterns of 10 years. That is a pattern that goes back to 10 years, and they only hire those people because the algorithm is built that way. You can't do that. You need to broaden your sources. You need to hire through referrals. You need to hire through friends. You need to hire through, for example, networking at conferences, for example. You need to hire through those sources, not only through the application website or not only through sourcing. Invest into a good talent acquisition. A lot of companies think that when they hire a diversity candidate, oh, it's all right, we can just go to an agency, we'll just fill it. What happens with an agency when they fill it for a vacancy? They fill it, okay, with 20,000 euro per vacancy for a director level position. What happens when the candidate leaves after 6 months, after the retention period is gone? It's still another problem for the company because the position is still open and the agency didn't do the job. So you need to invest in a good talent acquisition team. You need to have your sources, you need to have your recruiter to actually know what the candidate is looking for, if that is a match between the company and their values, and if that candidate is also a match for the company on their side, if the candidate will be happy with the challenges, if the candidate would be also listened to when they are voicing out. Because a lot of times I've seen it that the candidates are sidelined, and that's a major problem. And when I was attending this event at SOSU, that is also a big issue amongst our recruiter community, because SOSU is a sourcing event and there are a lot of recruiters who come there to learn, like me, for example. I'm an amateur recruiter, I'm not an expert, but I want to learn more. And those experts who are saying it are also noticing it, that the companies are hiring diversity, but they are not acting upon it. They are not including those diversity employees to be part of a major decision, to be part of an action plan, to be part of execution, to be part of deployment. So it is just a diversity hire, done and dusted case. We do not want to do that. We want to speak out, right? So this is why we're having this. And we need to encourage team collaboration. And that's exactly when you need a diversity advocate in the team, in the C-level, in the director level. I don't care where they sit, whether they sit in HR, whether they sit in the C board, for example. You have to have that member persuading the others to listen in for the diversity candidate and their voices, because that is the point of having a diverse team. And it is proven not just one time, but many times, that diverse teams provide the most beneficial profits, and they are the best for the growth as well, because they cover different aspects. And you have to activate your employer branding, because it's not just only about creating the hiring funnel, but it's also about attracting talent. You want to make sure your brand is relevant and attractive, and it stays on top of the talent's mind. So for example, if I want to choose an employer, I will look for the brand who are more open to women hires in tech, or who have more women population in tech, for example. So those kind of things. And you have to also address the wage gap, because it is 2021 turning 2022, but ladies, we are facing the wage gap. And it is a fact that, for every cent, every dollar that a man makes, we are only making 70% of it. So we need to address it. And as part of HR, we need to speak up about it. We need to be vocal. And I can't do that alone, of course, but I can only influence so much. But at the same time, this is a universal problem that companies need to address in order to tackle the diversity issue. There are companies who are tackling it. There are people who are staying in an organization for longer, but this is the time that when we need to speak up about it. So this is my take on this topic. And I think this is the end. So I'll open the floor for any questions. And I'll stop sharing as well.
So we have 3 questions. I want to congratulate you for the super interesting topic that you've been delivering. We have 5 minutes. Well, we can extend it to 5 minutes. So, and we have 3 questions. So I will start with the first one, which is, how do we keep our cognitive abilities sharp? And how do we keep the mind active and have a quick response to questions during work discussions?
That's a good question, but I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't really know how to answer that, but I'm going to try my best. So what I do is, it depends on whether you are interested in that work-related topic, also to keep your mind sharp during meetings. But at the same time, how do you keep your cognitive abilities sharp? you can do some exercises, for example. You can do some analytical exercises on the things that you like, for example, like some data collection. You just do it for personal purposes. I'm not so sure about you guys, but every time I have to do a personal purchase, which is like large, I will do a whole, like a spreadsheet analysis to see which one will be the best choice, for example. So those kind of things that I do to keep my mind sharp, but at the same time, it's a bit of a challenge for my brain to grasp, right? So with a lot of things factoring in, and that's how I keep it sharp. But that's the advice I would give. And when it comes to meetings, sometimes I'm also off topic and I'm just like, zoning out as well. So I'm also guilty of that. But I try my best to be involved on the topics that at least I'm interested for. So like, for example, say employer branding, or when it comes to sourcing or new training, for example. So those kind of topics I'm passionate about. So you have to find what is your passion again, and you have to see if you are interested to explore further in that career.
The second question is, how can you teach your colleagues to adopt a similar open and progressive approach to recruitment?
Oh, that is a delicious question. Okay. I always preach whenever I have the chance, which makes me kind of a nerd, but I always say, there are colleagues where I have come across who are, quite having their own subconscious. I don't want to name them, but of course, we are humans at the end of the day. So we need to be aware of our flaws, but at the same time, we need to admit that we are humans, right? Because we're all humans. Until the time that we cannot automate everything, we have to educate people. And I try my best to persuade. And for example, say there was a colleague who look at a CV, they will look at a picture, and that will form some kind of perception in their mind, whether this person is qualified or not. But as a recruiting professional, you should not do that. You should only look at the skills. You should only look at the experience. You should look at overall, not just the picture, because that is a discrimination right there, just by the picture. So how do I address it? I address it head on. I would just, bring them to a room, just have a one-to-one meeting. Look, I find this quite, something that we can improve on. It's not something that is, very negative, but at the same time, it is something that as a professional, you should overcome if you want to be the best, or if you want to be good in your field, if you want to be fair to others. Recruiting is not rocket science, but you have to do what is fair for everyone. And that's the thing where almost everyone gets it wrong, that they have now the right, and then they're just going to reject everyone based on their gut. But the gut is wrong. Even in SOSU, I learned that gut is the discrimination gut. That gut is the one that is saying, oh, you're not a culture fit, this is not your company. That gut you should not listen to. You should make a competency-based question, you should make behavioral-based question, and you should only make objective observations, and you should make a conclusion from that, not from the picture, not from the CV gap, for example. A lot of people take it, oh, they had a gap, but they could be doing something. They could have had a personal issue. We are only human. We need to make sure that we are also treating others as a human. That's how I would teach them. And that's how, even if they don't like me at the end of that conversation, it doesn't matter. I had to send my message across. And if I still see them doing the same thing, I would highlight it with the manager, because this is not a fair practice. And I would not have that in my team for anyone to treat any candidate that way. So that's what I will first tackle him head on, to whoever I have to teach, if it's a hiring manager, if it's a recruiter, for example. Then I will, if they improve it, then that is great. And if they don't, then I will talk to the hiring manager or the manager of the person, for example, so that we can talk about it, or we can talk about performance improvement plan. Next question. I hope that answered it.
The last question we have is about the percentage of women employees in most tech companies is much lesser than men. How can we solve this?
That's a very good question. I really keep asking myself that every day as well. I really wish I could solve it. So this question has twofold answer. In my experience, whenever I have a female candidate, I jump with joy and I make sure that I ask her every set of questions that I have to ask. I make that objective analysis, and I will make sure, even if there is a few red flags, for example, I will make sure I address it in the interviews. So then I can discuss it with the hiring manager up front, right? So there has been some red flags, but she has this and this and this, and this and this and this. That is for you to know. Now, when it comes to hiring, you are in a very competitive field with a lot of people. And that's also another thing that you need to consider, where you stand. You know, where you stand is a very important aspect when you're applying for a job. You need to know how big is your competition, how long is the line, how senior they are, for example. All the recruiters won't give you those answers, but they will tell you if you are in the last final rounds, if you have another candidate that's against you, for example. So those kind of things, you need to figure out where you stand as a female candidate in that. And if you have any concerns or anything like, for example, you cannot work 40 hours, you can only work 32 hours because you have a child, talk that with the recruiter, say that upfront so that they know it and you have clarity in what you can deliver and what you cannot. So make that boundaries upfront. How we can solve the population issue to balance it out, I think we need to invest more into STEM when it comes to training females to be more part of this tech and data bubble, for example. You know, I would really suggest that if people, if I were to give a talk, for example, say at a college, then I would really advise girls to also go into coding. I really want to go into coding myself, but I'm in this tech ecosystem, right? So I'm part of it somehow, but I also want to try coding because it's not as bad as those men have taught us in the past. And just like the imposter syndrome discussion, you know, we were always brought up to think that we are the one that is something wrong with us, that we cannot learn it, especially for girls. But that's not true. We can learn it as much as men can learn it. We can learn it faster because we're more agile. If you see a man fixating, you know, you will see that. But I'm not being biased here to men or women here, but I'm just saying in general, we are more flexible, we are more agile. So we are also thinking in a different way. We have our specialty. So we will find our way into this, but it's just that we have to be encouraged because girls being girls, they are shy a little bit. They are, you know, not so bold as a guy would go into tech, for example. So it has to be encouraged from earlier on rather than tackling it now. Sorry, is there any more question?
Yeah, there's one more question, but it's on the chat. So if you can answer there, and because we are running out of time and we have Kaveh waiting for her session. So
sure.
We will go next with Kaveh. Last but not least, the speaker. Let's see if I can share it. Yeah. So Kaveh Bulambo is a talent acquisition expert and DEI advocate. And she's been working in the tech industry for the last 7 years. She's also the founder of My Career Path and Talent Diverse, which are both aimed at empowering women and BIPOC professionals to build meaningful careers and connect with each other and employers through communities such as Black in Tech Berlin and Women in Work Connect. So, Kaveh, if you want to share your screen and give us your presentation.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for having me. As I have been introduced, my name is Kaveh Bulambo, and I will be talking to you, or we will be discussing why it is important to build a safe and inclusive organization in our world today. So as I have been introduced, my name is Kaveh. I'm a founder myself. I'm a talent acquisition expert and a community builder. My background is in psychology, gender studies, and public management. And once again, my love for diversity and inclusion led me to create the communities that I've created Women in Work Connect and Black in Tech Berlin. And it only made sense through the interaction of our members, but also interaction with my network and other employers to create a space where everybody can kind of have access to opportunities and resources. And so we came up with the idea to create Talent Diverse, which is basically a platform that allows different groups of minority professionals to come together in one space and be able to access resources that are coming through us, through our communities. And so Talent Diverse, if you will visit the website, you'll see that we are powered by different groups like Black in Tech Berlin or Black Dev UK and Women in Work Connect. And we have many more small community partners. And our main goal is basically to have them or to let them have access to the resources and support that is coming to us. Yeah, and if there are people here who are looking for work, we have quite a lot of job opportunities already on there. So feel free to go on to Talent Diverse if you're interested. If you also might be wondering who you might network with if you come onto the platform, a lot of our members are experienced professionals. They have between 3 and 7 years of working experience. 90% are working in the tech scene here in Berlin and across Europe. 99% of them, of course, again, are BIPOC and women. And we have a strong presence here in Europe. Almost 90%. We have a few visitors from the US and a few members that join us from across Africa and Asia. Awesome. So I wanted to do an interactive kickoff for this topic, and I wanted to get a little bit personal. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see, but what I wanted to share before this, how do I go back? Stay with to go back one slide. I think I do this. Oh, no. All right, but I wanted to ask in the room, and maybe, I'll ask later just by show of hands, and kind of see how many of us in the last year or two have felt the best of ourselves when we go to work, and how have those feelings, if those feelings have not been great, what kind of decision did we come up with because of the experiences that we might have encountered in the last year or 2 years in our working space. But since that slide has already disappeared and I can't see everybody, we can actually do that in the end. The numbers speak for themselves. There's a report that shows, or that was published actually this year, that says that Black women are more likely to report sexual harassment at work than white women. On the path to entry level to executive, Black workers experience lower rate of professional advancements and compensation, which basically leads to high rate of attrition. And the turnover rate in tech is twice as high for women than it is for men. And more than 35% of African Americans and Hispanic, as well as 45% of Asians, say that they need to compromise their authenticity in order to conform to their company's standard or style of working. So this is a lot to take in, and I just want all of us to just pause for a little moment. Again, I would have loved to, to see people's faces and kind of see if there's anybody who has experienced any of this, situations at work, or they've heard somebody, or they've had reports from their own work about such, incidents. But these are some of the elements that are making workspaces to be unsafe. And so how do we create a working environment where this does not happen? And just yesterday, we had an event to Black in Tech Berlin where we had a conversation with Black women in leadership. And it's such a coincidence that one of the struggles that the speaker was mentioning was the inability to bring her whole self to work, and how Black women are perceived whenever they work in an environment where they are the sole minority or they are the sole leader. And so these statistics are literally real life experiences that most people or most BIPOC and women are going through. And so if you're a manager listening to this conversation and you're wondering, or if just a person who's interested in how to create a safe and inclusive organization or company for your company, then stay on. So my first idea and experience is for your company to not only be diverse. There is a quote that I found that is very interesting, and this quote is by Andre Tapia, and it basically says that companies have been good at creating a workforce that looks different, but they've fallen short when it comes to understanding how to develop a corporate culture where all employees feel included, respected, comfortable, and able to do their best work. Now, we can all agree that the conversation around diversity and inclusion is really it's on top of every company at the moment. However, can we also prove or agree that these companies that have put the conversation on diversity itself and inclusion, do they have these mottos where their employees feel included, respected, comfortable, and able to do their best work? And so in order for you to not only be diverse, first of all, you have to understand what is diversity. And if you ask any company, they will tell you that they are diverse, and and probably you can see it. And so for me, I define diversity as all that is different and unique in us and others. That is race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, and many, many, many more elements that are not here. And my definition has been empowered by my upbringing and socialization. And I think everybody also who's participating here has also a definition of diversity, which is probably also defined by where they grew up and what kind of environment they've been socialized. And so if you take this to the workplace, everybody in your company has their own definition of what diversity is. Your leaders, your founders, your executives, they all see it in a different way. But you want to come to a place where at least there's common ground on what is it that we're trying to emphasize in our culture when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And for me, this is it. And so the next thing you need to do is to recognize diversity in needs. And so once you've defined what diversity is, you need to realize that in itself needs to be, you basically need to realize that these definitions of diversity that you had will require a diverse response to each and every category that you have under your definition of diversity. And I think that can be pretty hard, and that's why sometimes some of the strategies fail. But I think if you have leadership or a team that is invested in this conversation, then it can become a little bit easier. And so just understand that different members of your team or organization need different structures in order to thrive. And when you put this into perspective, especially when you talk about the tech industry, we all know, or you might know, that there are reports out there that the turnover rate is 50% as high for women than it is for men. Why is it that women are leaving the tech industry at such a high rate? Is it because their needs are not being understood? Is it because the structures that are in place are not enabling them to thrive? Is it because somebody is not really paying attention to what feedback they're giving to the company? Why is this happening? You can ask the same question about BIPOC professionals as well. Why are they in the rates of the highest range of attrition in companies from entry level to executive? This is really, really high, and pretty much disturbing. If we spend a lot of money trying to hire diverse candidates, and then you have a high rate of them leaving at such a high level, then we really need to sit down and find out or figure out what is the root cause. And so when we sit down and start digging deep, what is wrong, what is wrong in our companies when it comes to women? Then we find out, then we put processes in place. What is wrong when it comes to BIPOC professional? Why aren't they staying in our companies? Then we figure out, then we put processes in place. So these diverse responses to the diverse candidates in your company will create a space where people feel safe, people feel included, and of course, you will reap the benefits as a company. And so the next thing that I want for you to focus on, sorry about this, YouTube, my kids basically use my computer a lot. Close that. And so you will realize that a lot of your work actually is not supposed to be at the top level, which is basically we are diverse, or we're inclusive, or we look inclusive. Your work should basically focus on inclusion. And inclusion is basically giving space, access, and a voice to the difference in everyone in your company. And this happens basically based on the previous point that I've just talked about, recognizing the different responses that you need to put in place for the different diverse candidates or professionals that you have in your company. So you need to give them space, access, and the voice, and together come up with solutions that might work for your organization in becoming inclusive. You also need to recognize that inclusion is not only focusing on how we look like as a company, but it also looks at how we are, basically look at how we also express ourselves as individuals, and as companies and as leaders, it is very important for us to grasp these elements. And so the next slide will be how would actually inclusion look like, because it is for me nice to talk about it. And of course, you probably have read about it, but how does it actually look like? So it might look like hiring good leaders who are role models. This is really, really important. If you're in Berlin, there's an article that's going around about one executive who basically has used his power to, how do I say this in the most nicest way possible, to take advantage of women professionals and, in his company. And this individual has so much power. It's such a large company. They don't lack money. They don't lack in terms of innovation. But that story shook the media a little bit in the Berlin space. And this is 2021, and we still have those kind of stories. So you want to hire good leaders who are role models, leaders who are influencers, leaders really who are interested and invested in our people. Because if I'm not invested in the people that I'm leading or mentoring, there is no way I'm going to find out about the needs that they have and try to put the structures in place so that they can succeed. You also need to put in place processes that enable employees to speak up. And so this might look like ERG, for example. I hope that some of you are in companies that have employee resource groups where you can actually get together with employees that identify with yourself in different areas and together discuss about some of the topics that interest you, but also some of the challenges that you face as a group, and together present your requests to the company. It's so much better when you go as a group than when you go as an individual. The next thing you want to do, and this is based on the quote that I read before by Andrea, is to build a culture where everyone feels respected and valued. The reason why people feel that they they need to hide who they are. It's because they believe that if they showed who they were, they will not be they will not be as valued as they should be. And so people put on a face, put on a mask, and put on all kind of personal structures, so they can succeed and just keep the waters around them safe. And you don't want a company or an atmosphere that is like that, where people feel afraid to come as they are. You want people to come, as authentic as possible. But this can only be achieved if people feel respected, and valued. Like, I feel respected whether I have an afro, whether I have blue hair, or whether I have pink hair, whether I'm transgender, whether I have, a different sexual orientation, let me come as I am. If you don't have that culture, it's going to be very hard to build a safe organization. And another thing that I think is very important is really to continue to educate your entire organization on why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. I don't think there is an end to this conversation, or I don't think there is a point where a company will get and say, okay, we're done doing this work now. We've achieved, when we've achieved our goal when it comes to DEI. And if there was an end, all companies that are successful on the market would have already gotten this right. But you can see it doesn't matter how much money a company has, in order for them to become a diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization. So these are really core individual values that are transmissible from one person to another. And when our funders and our managers do not embody, these qualities or this perception about life, it becomes really hard to kind of translate that in the entire organization. And so the benefit, as you might know already, for companies that are diverse and inclusive and equitable is innovation, profitable, and sustainability. We all heard Facebook changed their name to Meta. And one of the articles I read recently, the company is really trying to get out of this whistleblower incident that we all know, that basically the whistleblower told us a lot of information about Facebook that is not really good for humanity in general in terms of their product. And basically what they're trying to do is to recreate another brand that separate from the bad name that their brand already has. So even though the company already has a larger share of the market, their sustainability model is really unstable right now, because they actually are not taking care either of their users' data. They're not taking care of, their employees when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So all these things might look minor, but they might hit companies very hard at some degree. And so companies that are taking care of becoming safe, inclusive, diverse, equitable, will experience greater innovation that's long lasting. I'm not talking about innovation that's just trending for a couple of years and then, it dies off. And also not talking about profits that are gained, misusing people's data, people's information, or selling products that are coming from sources that are not either good for us, or either good for the environment. So I hope you will choose companies, or you'll get to work for companies that are equitable, inclusive, and diverse. And I wish, that these benefits, then will become the turnaround benefits for your company. And so what are the losses? I've said it earlier, the losses of not creating a safe working place is that you have people leaving. people just leave. Basically, they come in and they quit, as we saw in the rates of black employees from entry level to executives. They're basically just leaving. Women leaving the tech space, so 50% as high as men. So this is really high because we are spending a lot of money trying to hire people, and to have them leave at that rate is expensive. A lot of companies don't talk about this, but it is very expensive. And when you're losing people, you're losing money. Of course, you're also losing profits. Not only do you lose trust in customers, but you also lose actually trust in the best employees out there, like in terms of attracting talent. You might ask the best of engineers, in Berlin, which companies they would love to work for. And I can assure you that it's not going to be the top trended, companies that might be on top of our heads, but actually might be smaller companies that are working on causes that are more closer to their hearts and that are doing good in the world. And so you want to position yourself as a company that is trusted, that is doing good, that is solving a significant, challenge. And I guess some companies are also okay with the losses. So some companies are okay with having a revolving door of employees coming in and going because they've just made a whole lot of money. I'm sure we've seen, I don't know if you've seen a recent video of Amazon where they show the workers in the fulfillment stores, and they also show Jeff Bezos going to space and him saying, thank you to all the employees for paying for this. And so, the profits are still coming in at Amazon, but you then have this scenario where people in the fulfillment are mistreated and all kind of other, experiences are going on there. So you want to make sure that you're not that kind of an employer, that you're building a safe space for people to thrive in as an organization. But also, I think from an employee's perspective, these are the things that you can actually use to define if this is a place that you want to work at. You want to decide based on this, findings, if you will thrive at this organization, if you're able to build a sustainable career. I don't think it should only be about the power that companies have. You also have power as a candidate, and you have the autonomy to decide where you're going to contribute a lot of your time in terms of work, so that the company can benefit and you also benefit. So use them as well. Do the research before you join any company and see if you'll be able to thrive as a woman or a BIPOC professional. Yeah, and in closing, I would love to leave with this quote, and this quote focuses on women. And I'm focusing on women because the world population, half of the world population is women. And it is very important that we take care of the circumstances and the structures in our society, in our world, to understand why is it that women are not thriving in our society. And like Chimamanda says, culture does not make people. People make culture. If it is true that the full humanity of women is not our culture, then we can and must make it our culture. We have to make sure that our workspaces are inclusive and safe for women and BIPOC, because they are half of the world population. They could be half of your employee numbers, and so if you don't take care of that, if you don't want to look at the world in that angle, then you are not interested in diversity and inclusion, and you shouldn't present yourself as if you do, because there's just a great number of people whose needs and concerns you're not, paying attention to, which you should if you want to build a safe and inclusive organization. And so that will be the end, and I'll open the floor to questions.
Thanks a lot, Kaveh, for your amazing presentation. We have, for example, one question is, how do you recommend should companies approach addressing the needs of the different diverse groups without appearing to prioritize one diverse group over another?
Okay, so to be honest with you, companies have been prioritizing gender diversity, and also, to be honest with you, when it comes to gender diversity, it is white women first and everybody else comes after. And so this just depends on the awareness that the team that the company has put together, the understanding of the intersectionality of diversity. And so if I am your diversity and inclusion officer, I should already come to the table with an understanding that when I talk about women, I talk about all groups of women. I talk about white women, Black women, Asian women, transgender. I talk about basically, I take a wheel of intersectionality and I put it there as my source of practice in every strategy that I'm going to bring about. But then again, you have it in such a way that when companies choose who their diversity and inclusion officer are going to be, it's most of the time people that are not going to challenge them because it's just easier to work with people that are not going to challenge you. And so that officer is responsible for making sure that there is no overemphasizing of a certain group over the other. However, I will also say, we saw last year that the Black Lives Matter movement put Black voices at the center of the conversation. And so most companies now started focusing on the experiences of Black professionals at work. And that all went, great. And then we had, the Asian hate situation. And then companies now like, oh my God, we didn't know Asians also experience, racism. And so they started now jumping to the next grouping. And so in the end, as a company, you don't want to be jumping from this group to the other, to the other, to the other. Only when something bad happens, you really already need to come to understanding that there are structures in the world that put people based on their gender, race, class, or whatever their diversity, background is, put them at a disadvantage. And you put processes in place that are not responsive only to what's happening outside, but actually continues with your business plan as an organization.
Yes, as you say, there are many companies that are trying to tackle one problem at a time, and when in the end they have to tackle all of them at the same time. So at least the effort is big as a first step.
Absolutely. Thank you for all the good messaging I can see in the chat coming. Thank you.
Let's move now to the panel then, and let's see if we have more questions after.
Thank you.
So the panel we are going to have now, it's with EiEi and Kaveh about the future of work. So I have prepared several questions for this. You can stick with them. If not, you can continue as best as you know. So the first one would be who we should involve in order to have a better environment in the company. Should we approach our colleagues? Should we approach the board? Should we approach, I don't know, another kind of level?
It really depends on the company. If it is a very small company, then yeah, executives for sure. But if it's a bigger company like Facebook, for example, the executives aren't doing anything. It's not in their mission teams that's happening. The company culture is more localized. So they have the smaller mission teams where they focus on each specific task. And those culture is the one that the managers should look out for. And that's where it should be changed, if anything has to be changed. Please,
yeah, another angle to look at it is, as a founder, you are the culture. You are the visionary behind the product that's coming out of the market. And a lot of people join because of you, because of the innovation that you bring to the world. And so if you're a person that is not conscious, you really not a conscious leader and you make decisions that actually are not reflecting the world that you live in, then there is a problem. Basically, everybody is going to replicate the motto or the values that you're bringing up as a founder. And then the founder influences the executive team, and the executive team influences the hiring managers and so on and so forth. So it's good to start at the top. But then again, you can have a bottom-down approach where employees can unionize and kind of form groups of power, but then it just becomes a battle, between the company and the founder, the employees and the executive teams, trying to tell them, you need to create a safe working environment. And they're like, yeah, you need to keep working, so honestly, I believe it comes with the founder.
And for example, yourselves, how do you envision the future of work? How do you think the situation or jobs are going in the future, in the near future, I would say?
Awesome. So I read a couple of articles before COVID around the future of work. And the article said that a lot of the jobs of the future are not there yet. And so there are a lot of skills that are going to be needed that we all do not possess right now. And so what I can recommend is to be in a continuous learning kind of mindset where you're always updating your skills, because the skills of tomorrow nobody has the skills yet to build what will come. However, there are trends that the future of work is data-driven, it's technology, it's innovation. And so if you are in an industry that is slow paced and, that's still very manual, just start moving yourself to where there is creativity, there is innovation, there is improvement, in order for you to stay thriving. But also the future of work right now, I see it's very centered on the employees. It's giving employees the power to determine where they would love to spend their time. Now we have the power. I don't know if you've seen around the resignation. How do you call that? The season of
Great resignation.
The great resignation.
Yeah, it's going on with the COVID. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's still going on. It's still happening. And I've also read some articles that, it will settle down at some point, but the power will remain with the employees or with the talent, basically. It's because there's a lot of opportunities around. There's a lot of people who are hiring, but at the same time, hiring is still a problem. There are people who can't find a job, and the employers need to face it, basically, because let's face it, in the talent acquisition, people know that, during COVID, there was hiring freeze. What did the companies do? They put on hold for raises. They let people go. And that's exactly why they're having this shortage, right? So now this is their time to battle up. This is their time to level up against what is going to come ahead. It's not.
Absolutely.
It's I've also read a post where there was a startup, a scale up actually, hiring for people, and it was a candidate who was asking for shares, and it was not the company's culture to provide shares, but then for that candidate they actually made it happen because they needed that skills, they needed that expertise. So things are going to happen if you bring the right values to the table. You need to know what you bring to the table, and you need to define it, and you need to know that you need to own it, basically. But yeah, it will also be upskilling is very much relevant to our kind of days now, because as Kaveh said, we don't know the skills that's going to be needed in the future. We don't know the jobs that's going to exist in the future. People in TA don't have any clue about it as well. So what can we do to prepare ourselves? We just have to get into the mindset of continuous learning, and we have to be relevant to the job market, whether you want to go contractor or whether you want to do self-employment, whether you want to do entrepreneurship. That's up to you, of course, but in general there are always going to be people who are looking for jobs, and there are always going to be people who are looking for a stable paycheck. So that's more towards that the future of work, but it will settle down after this COVID boom. But now it's still the time of great resignation. So people are resigning left, right, and center.
Absolutely, yeah. I was going to add, the future of work is also going to be remote and flexible. We've seen that you can now work from anywhere. There is no turning back to that. A lot of companies have made their offices redundant. Yeah, you can do work from anywhere. So again, much power to us. It's flexible. If you have kids, you can work, you have your kids at home. Your kids can now appear in your video calls, no problem. We all understand. And so I think the future looks good for candidates that will stay at the top of what's happening and update their skills. And candidates that are good at spotting opportunities.
Yeah. We also have a question in the chat saying, what if you see any trends in terms of self-employment?
Yes, especially in the recruitment space, a lot of senior engineers are preferring to become consultant, or basically a lot of work that can be done on the computer, that doesn't need a lot of, physical interaction. A lot of those people are preferring to become consultants and freelancers. And I think if you're of that mindset, I will definitely encourage it, because companies are also making changes in the way they contract even their employees. You can join as a freelance full-time employee. I mean, that did not exist that before COVID. But because of the shortage of skills and experts on the market, especially in tech, there's a need to change the way we're contracting people, and freelancing, self-employment is really at the rise, and companies don't mind anymore because there's just a huge demand.
100% agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Or at least I think it's
We're
difficult.
recruitment, bring it on.
Okay, yeah, now it's my time to ask, not you. So is there something from the past that you would bring to the future, like culturally speaking, from the workspace?
Adaptability. It's really important. As a person, as an individual, you need to know where you're going, and you need to know what you need and what you need to unlearn and what you need to learn more. So you need to be flexible about yourself, about your skills, about where you stand. Once again, I keep going back to that same point, but you need to know where you stand as part of the team. You need to know what you bring to the table as part of the team. Is very important. And if people are not flexible, for example, because I come from a very conservative culture, right? Myanmar, if they are going through a civil war right now. So it's a bunch of stubborn people not trying to listen to anybody, just trying to shoot everybody. So that's basically what Myanmar is. So from where I grew up, adaptability is very important for you to survive, not even to make a living, but for you to survive, in order to know how to get out of it, in order to know how to make a living out of it, or how to get out and then make a living of it, basically. So it's a very important skill. And I think as an individual, I want to bring it to the future as long as I can see it, because if you're not adaptable, if you're not flexible, you're not going to fit in anywhere.
I would love to bring in people interaction. So the world is becoming more digital. And through the ages of COVID, we've seen that the interaction that we had with people before COVID was really important in terms of our mental well-being. And I will still continue to do that in the future, where we have the opportunity to work together or be together in some form of ways, especially as communities. I wouldn't, I know tech is digital, it's, we should do the fastest and quickest thing, but I will still keep the human element in the future, really. Not many robots, a lot more people, bring a lot of people interaction in the future.
So we are talking about the future as a place or an environment of change. Do you think that this change, we can, ourselves as individuals can also contribute to this change, or are only the companies the one who have the power for it?
I mean, we are the future. We are the companies. We are building the companies. We're basically creating the future every day. I think there is a quote that says, don't think about tomorrow, but think about today as tomorrow. And when we talk about the future, every single step that we take today is basically determining the kind of tomorrow we're creating. And that tomorrow cannot happen without us. If there is a tomorrow that's happening without us, then we're basically stuck in the past, basically. Like, we're not growing, we're not evolving, we're static, But I truly believe that we are the powerful beings creating our tomorrow as individuals, that we have that capacity and autonomy. And then we bring that to the different organizations that we go with and spend 8 hours a day with them so that we can create their product future. So we can decide which future do we want to create with which company.
100% agreed. We are the future. It's no longer the companies creating the culture or the standards. Basically, we are the future. We set the tone. We as people hold the power, because as with the Great Resignation, companies need employees to function. They cannot function without people. Robots are not functional. AI, you can forget about it, especially in hiring. It's people are talking about it, but it's not happening yet, especially because of those diversity and automation issues, because they cannot oversee that fact, So until they can automate things, until they can bring robots in and have them have empathy, for example, or human skills, basically, like interpersonal skills, the communication skill as a human, until then, they cannot replace us. So we as the humans, we hold the power moving forward. And especially as Kava said, the flexibility is the future. The remote part is the future. And we set the terms. We want to work remotely. We want to have flexible hours. We also want to have human interaction. And they have to set it right. They have to do it right now. So that's the future.
And what is the role of feedback in the future? Giving and receiving feedback.
Very important. It's not just in the future, it's also important now. I think if you have open communication, feedback is very, very important. And also important is that you don't take feedback personally. You take feedback in order to improve. Sometimes people tend to take feedback like, okay, that's a little too much. That's a little too much into my personal zone. But don't take it that way. Take your time to digest it. Take your time to process it healthily, and then reciprocate it in your work life, because it will improve your professional career. It will improve and it will take you to the next opportunity, the next step. And this is how you grow in a professional career, at least in my opinion. Kava?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think about feedback as data, a lot of the times when you talk about diversity and inclusion, they ask you, where's the data? Well, can you prove that, 50% of women actually leaving, the workforce? And you can actually use feedback as a form of data collection and use that feedback to make informed decisions. Like every business decision that I know that determines the OKRs for the quarter is basically because of the feedback on the product. This feature did not work. This UX is bad. We need to improve it in this way. Why can't we do the same when it comes to people and culture within the organization? So if you think about it as data that is important and useful for your growth and innovation in your company, you're going to take it with you every day of your life, basically.
We have a question from Davide Rizzo. who asks, will tech work become more about people, humans, communication, and empathy? Can we imagine that becoming a trend?
So the trend right now is moving towards where we're not focusing on people. We're focusing on machines. That's where most of the innovation is going. But I think we can continue to influence and advocate that the technology that we're building is authentic and has a lot of empathy and bringing people, putting people at the center of what's being built. But right now, I don't think it's a trend. I think right now the trend is, do the fastest thing as possible, have as less interaction as possible with humans, so that you can get what you need to get done. We're basically cutting people off at the moment from my view. I don't know about you.
So from my perspective, I think it's more about enabling people. So people will never be out of the picture, in my opinion. And I've actually had this conversation a few times with the CTO of the previous organization. So I believe, and he also believes, in enabling people with technology. So that means that we replace robots to do the things that are mundane. So in the sense that if I have to send an email 20 times a day, I will make a robot task that, and I will not do that. And I will get to do the fancier things. In recruitment, say I will get to do the interviewing, for example, instead of doing administration. So instead of having a coordinator, I will replace that task with the robot, and then the coordinator can become a recruiter in that sense. So that is what I believe in. That is going to be the way for the future. It will not become people orientated, but it will take away the mundane task of what people do at normal times. And that will become a trend, because that will support the human to do a better job at, being an overall rounded job, for example, which something the robot cannot do. If, say, they can replace the robot interviewing, that's still an if and instead of a when at this point, because they don't have empathy. They only can predict patterns. They cannot understand the tone. They cannot understand the different variations in the voice, for example, or facial expression. They are still having problems with facial recognition with different colors of races on iPhone, for example. It's because of the differences in the facial recognition. It's not just a white face, but it's a different color face. So at this point, how are they going to mimic or understand what kind of facial expression means what? We humans have a lot of expressions. So I don't think the tech will be able to replace us, or it will not become about what people can do, but it will be about what the robots can take, and we're going to give that task to the robots. At least that's my perspective. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So what would be the signs that we are going in the right direction?
As the world, or as
in the future of work in the tech industry?
I mean, a lot of things are showing us around the world that we have not been making the right decisions. I mean, if you just look at the environment, we have not been making the right decisions, and we need to to start making the right decisions when it comes to the environment. We are living the repercussions. When it comes to technology, we also need to understand that the way technology has been built so far has been exclusive, and some of it has been mischievous. And we need to change that. We need to build technologies that are empowering, that are reflecting the world that we are living in, but are also solving important challenges of our world, not putting, for example, kids at risk or women at risk, but we're actually building tools that will take us to the right place as the world and as people, not tools that will destroy us. Of course, I think this is the, the positive person in me, or the, how do you say, optimist in me that loves to see the positive. But I also know that in the world, it's all about competition and power. And the more competing you are, the more influence you have in making decisions in our world. And so this competition will continue and form, different kind of world powers that will determine who makes decisions. And so all these societies and groups of people who have felt that they don't have the power to make important decisions that influence our world, I think their unionization and realizing that they could also have a power as a unity, could collide, for example, in tech and start building solutions that are inclusive and that are also solving, important problems, and kind of kill off the big monopolies up there. Hopefully.
That's the optimist in us.
Would you like to give more insights regarding this question?
No, I think I completely agree with Kava, because the competition is there at large, but at the same time we have to look at how far we have come through with technology, right? It's not like over a day we've developed this. We've had our evolution over time. It's one step at a time, I would say, because everything, it's about taking a step at a time and then reflecting whether it was right or not. So we cannot predict as I'm just a recruiter. What do I know, right? Like a lot of reputation that I have online, everybody hates recruiters. So I cannot just comment on whether we're going right or whether we're going wrong. It's all very much subjective and as to my perception as well. So as the competition is out there, you need to be aware of what you're doing. And I think reflection is very important to everyone who has that power to make a decision, whether it's for yourself or for your company. The larger the responsibility is, the larger you have to reflect, the more time you need to reflect, because there's a lot of people who are following your direction, whether it is right or whether it is just to fly to the moon for fun. You have to decide.
Yeah, it's true. So I would like to thank you, both of you, for giving us super good insights about the future of work. This workshop is coming to an end, but before that, I would like to give some conclusions or some things that I've been writing during this whole session, during this whole workshop, about each of you as how do you call it, as speakers. So, for example, from Tebogo, for example, we've learned how the status quo is still in us and how we have to tackle it, and how it is important to add belonging to the DEI process, and how we should interact with it, and how we should try to blend it into our realities, not only DEI, but DEI-B, adding this B to the table. From Marie, I would say that we've learned how to understand, or that we should understand our worth in order to give the best of ourselves, and to understand, or to understand also the value that we are bringing into our companies, and how to that we should be able to identify at one point the people that we can trust in our companies, but also I would say in our communities, in order to express our emotions if we are not able to express it in our companies, in our teams, at least to find it in someone from the whole company, and trust, and give them their trust, our trust, sorry. From me, we've learned how to find, that is very important to find our passion, because it's passion what is keeping us moving. And also some tips that we as HR workers or employees, we should apply in order to be as passionate as EiEi in her job. And from Kaveh, we've learned why women in BIPOC leave the companies, how we should address, or how should companies address this problem, because it's something that it's really happening at the moment, and it's something that it's really urgent to work. And also we have learned from her that we should educate our organizations about why DEI is important. And I would also add this as Tebogo was adding, how we should educate our organizations and teams why belonging is also important. So thank you all for your time today, tonight, or this morning. It depends on where you're located. It's been really insightful, this series, and I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot also. And yeah, so also to finish, I would say that please feel free to contact us if you have more questions or any doubt. I guess all of the speakers will be glad to answer, and I would also be glad to answer, or I don't know, give you feedback or anything you need. And just to remind you that at 8 o'clock, well, in 15 minutes, 14 minutes to be exact, we have our last key speaker, which is Naomi Seder. And I invite you to go and follow her, because I'm pretty sure her talk will be super inspiring. So have a nice day, have a nice weekend, all of you, and hope to see you super soon.